Back in the late 1940s and early 1950s, before the invention of proper music or pleated pants, the sock puppetry craze was sweeping America, and the greatest exponent of it was surely none other than Jake Elvicious Craven. His touring manager, close personal friend, and provider of many of the socks, Albert Ham.
Well, you know, Jake was a character, a real character. At 6'9", the tour bus was a difficult place for him to be a lot of the time, and his ravenous need to continually eat beef took its toll on his expanding waistline and his entourage's nostrils. But, you know, he'd while away the hours making puppets. After taking all of our socks and leaving us all barefoot, he'd start in on the soft furnishings and whatever was in the fridge, anything. Jake was a maverick. He'd make a puppet out of just about anything. Heck, I even saw him try to manipulate an animated roadkill one afternoon. Of course, that was during his infamous opium and canned cheese addiction phase.
Jake's brother and button provider, Harold Craven.
Yeah, Jake could be a perfectionist, a stickler for his craft. He once had me trying to sort some purple and yellow cork buttons at 4 a.m. in Reykjavik. No two puppets were ever the same, and they had their own specific personalities. I like to think they were all an extension of Jake, though. Part Jesus Christ, part the devil.
Faith played a great part in Jake Craven's life, and he could often be found passed out drunk or high on quaaludes, defecating on the graves of great men who inspired him. Far from being a menace, however, now just 4 months after his death from an overdose of paisley curtains in a 70s nostalgia bunker in Paraguay, it's almost impossible to find anyone who had a bad word to say about him. British tour promoter and one-time friend Jeffrey Guts.
Jake, he was marvellous, wonderful chap. Life of the party, great puppeteer, but a deeply spiritual man too. He never broke anybody's legs, frequented any brothels, pulled the plug on a life support machine for a joke, or dismissed his wife and children without saying a prayer, talking to a priest, or burying his face in a big bowl of crack.
Tragedy would befall Jake many times in his life, mostly because he'd made some massive mistake or was a bit of a shit. But it was perhaps losing his first wife through massive neglect and his routine, numerous and public infidelities, including one time on stage when he had a three-way with a juggler and a sword swallower, that hit him the hardest, and they divorced in 1951 because she couldn't appreciate his artistic process. She was quoted in a local newspaper saying it had absolutely nothing to do with that time he killed a parakeet at a child's birthday party with a shovel, or the fact that he had publicly bragged about sleeping with the defensive lineup of Montreal's all-women's ice hockey team, but simply that puppet making came first, and she had a hard time with that.
That was part 1 of the life and times of Jake Craven, the last true American. Part 2 will be tomorrow night at 10 o'clock after And Another Thing I Don't Like About the Dutch with Celia Cleft. And now on Radio Flange Goblet, it's everyone's favourite excuse for hanging themselves from a light fixture and having a neighbour belt their genitals raw with a rusty spanner, the After Movie Diner, which this week comes live from seedy night spot Poke. Situated in Cardiff's notorious clown district, the maitre d' Lenny Brush suggests you all pack a cagoule, as Gertie Pygmalion and his ruptured cheeks are playing tonight, and it's about to get, in their own words, grotesquely messy in here. In the first place. No, it's really too big to be in here. Oh, look, okay, put it next to the statue of Pestilence. I'm doing a show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the After Movie Diner, and it truly is a special, spectacular, spanking and splendid show this week. Really, we have put a show together for you like no other. You are going to enjoy it, or not, or you're just going to think it's fairly average and you've probably heard it all before because you're so jaded or hopped up on cheesy and or sugary snacks that really you're not even listening to what I'm saying now, and you're probably picking your belly button fluff or your bum or something. Anyway, just a few bits of business before we get to all the excitement. The first bit of business is that this is going to be the second week that I ask everyone listening to go and rate and review the show. Now, very exciting is that you can go to iTunes, TalkShoe, or Stitcher, all places where the rating really, really, really matters because it helps us go up in the charts on those particular sites. And you don't even have to write a review. If you're too busy or too lazy, but if you're too busy to even have time to sit down and put just a few words together about what you think about the show, then you can just give us a star rating. That helps too. You can go to iTunes, TalkShoe, or Stitcher, and just with one click of the mouse, go and give us a star rating. It's really this simple. You go to After Movie Diner on iTunes, Stitcher, or TalkShoe, you find us, it comes up, you click on the thing, or you go to our webpage, aftermoviediner.com, which you should really have bookmarked because all the links are on there. You go to the links of the page, you find us on those things, and you simply do this. There we go, one click of the mouse, and you've given us a star rating, and it helps. So really, if you're too busy, you're too lazy, or if you've already written and reviewed us somewhere else, but you haven't done it on TalkShoe or Stitcher, or you haven't done it on iTunes or Stitcher, whatever it is, go to one of those things, just give us a star rating. It's really this simple. One click of the mouse. Listen, there we go. That's it. You're on your way. It's that quick. It's that easy. It's that simple. And it really, really does help. And it's free. And it really does help because it helps us go up the rankings, it helps us go up the listings, whatever it is. It just really, really helps. Now, we've got a couple more bits of business before we get to the good stuff, the tasty fondant inside of this large chocolate-wrapped podcast. And first up is an email that we got from regular listener, regular contributor, and future guest of the show, Robert Long. And he wrote, John, listening to that midnight podcast you did. Now, when he says midnight podcast, what he actually means is a round table video that I did over at the FDTC network, which is the new home of the After Movie Diner. And that's over at www.fromdusktillcon.com. And if you go to the radio page there, you'll be able to watch the video yourself. It was me, Bill, and Lewis, and we discussed horror movies and horror TV show, and we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughs, and we discussed British humor and a whole bunch of stuff. It's really great. It's only an hour long. Go watch the video. Go enjoy it over at fromdusktillcon.com. But watching that, Robert says, I brought up something interesting. He said, you talked about being a fan of the Walking Dead comics, but that the show is lacking several things that they could take from the comics. On the other side of the coin, you have talked about not needing to know the superhero comics to enjoy a superhero movie. However, those of us that enjoy the superhero comics tremendously can see where they are ignoring core pieces of what would make that character work and tick. Of course, we feel if they paid attention to those items, the movies would be better and even more successful. Do you agree? Discuss on the show, Rob. Well, I can, of course, bring this up again, Rob, when we have David DeMoss on the show and we're talking more in depth about comic book movies. Well, it would be a really interesting discussion. I think that, yes, the source material should be respected. And I completely understand the complaint from comic book fans that either in the TV shows or the movies based on those comic books that the characters could be improved or the characters could be changed or the motivations could be better explained or whatever it is if they went back to the source material. I think, there'd be better stories to tell and so on. And I think that there's no problem in terms of movies or TV shows going to the source material and finding good key points or good things to do within their movies and TV shows. But I do think there's a slight mix of points here because when I was saying that you shouldn't have to be a comic book fan in order to appreciate comic book movies, what I meant is that there's sort of two completely different things. And if you're putting a film out there, the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we were talking about, or an individual film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, of course, being a fan of the comic books is going to give you a deeper, richer, broader understanding. But like you're saying, it might also frustrate you because you wish that they'd done, X, Y, and Z in terms of the plot of the comic book versus the plot of the movie. But my only point was when you watch those films, you shouldn't have to have deep, rich knowledge of the comic books in order to enjoy those films. My point was that the films need to be written better. Now, my point about The Walking Dead is that the TV show needs to be written better as well. It really does. and maybe the comic book could provide some help with writing it better, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone, to enjoy the show, needs to go and read the comic book. I think it's sort of two separate points. But I think it's a really interesting discussion to be had there. And I think that ultimately my sort of dissatisfaction with that show comes down to the fact that the zombie films that most people like and the zombie films that most people quote or talk about or whatever are normally the zombie films that have like a kick-ass soundtrack and well-written script and fun characters and yes, all the gore, and yes, all the atmosphere, and yes, all the rest of it. But ultimately, if people analyze why they like Dawn of the Dead, why they like Night of the Living Dead, why they like Day of the Dead, why they like Lucio Fulci's Zombie or Living Dead at Manchester Morgue or anything like that, It's more to do with the combination of the characters and the writing and the music and everything else, and I think that's what The Walking Dead lacks. I think that it takes itself far too seriously and doesn't have the doesn't have the elements that we all love. It has all the gore elements under the sun, and like I said on the show, Nicotero's work is great, but in terms of I guess people would call it that cheese factor or that B-movie factor or whatever it is. It just isn't cutting it. But no, I don't think you need to have read a Sherlock Holmes book to see a Sherlock Holmes movie if a Sherlock Holmes movie is written correctly. And I don't think you need to have read the comic books to appreciate The Walking Dead or appreciate any of the Marvel Universe or Superman or anything like that, because those films should be written correctly. So that would be my only point. I hope I've cleared that up. But yes, we can bring that up again when Dave is on the show. But thanks ever so much for writing in, Robert. That's fantastic. Okay, well, it's always a thrill when I get to introduce an interview onto the show. It's not something that we make the key element of the show. Not every show has to have an interview with a famous person or a celebrity or an actor or a director or a producer or anything like that. But I have to say it is a thrill when we can get people on the show of such fantastic caliber, with such history, with such knowledge about the business and things like that. That really excites me because it means that we're providing something that people can listen to that's hopefully going to interest them, give them some knowledge, fuel their passion, maybe even help them, if they're interested in the business or the career or anything like that. And really, you couldn't get much better or a bigger fan of knowledge or someone who's been in the business longer and richer than the guy we're going to have on the show coming up. Second only to Roger Corman, really, in terms of genre film producer. It's the fantastic, wonderful, engaging Charles Band from Full Moon Features, previously of Empire Pictures. And if those names or those words don't mean anything to you, then I'm sure, Reanimator and Trancers and Subspecies and Puppet Master, and the list is endless. I'm sure those things, or at least one of those things, means something to you. So it's an absolute thrill, an absolute pleasure, and absolutely fantastic to have on the show right now film producer, film director, film writer, entrepreneur, and entering his 5th decade in the business. It's none other than Mr. Full Moon Features himself, Charles Band. So you got your start in the 70s, and obviously your father was a filmmaker who, in fact, you went on to work with on several projects. What kind of inspiration was he? What advice did he have? What was it like starting out then?
Well, he was a great inspiration because he was just a fantastic father. In relation to film, I was fascinated sort of by the whole enterprise, and I grew up literally on a movie set. My earliest memories were being just sitting, as this little kid, just watching, everything seemed so huge, big lights, big people, big, sets, horses, we were, in the early days, he made, epics with Steve Reeves, and spaghetti westerns, and, back in those days, everything was literally larger. Today with a little camera and some lights, you can, accomplish what it took, lots of big cameras and lots of men and huge, heavy lights that had to be moved by 2 or 3 grips or set up by gaffers. And, the whole enterprise was much more labor intensive because we were shooting on 35. So
Yeah.
So I grew up on set and observed a lot. So even before some of the real, I guess, teaching began, I guess I was always sort of exposed to the way he did things and how calm he was, which you need to be if you're going to be, especially producing shows. And it's a crazy temperamental business. And I think actors back then were even allowed more liberty to be, to be dramatic when they needed to be, or not when they maybe didn't need to be. Today, I mean, I'm sure huge stars still can be that way, but I think things have changed a little bit. So I had all this early stuff as I was a little kid on set, and he put me in a few movies, which I didn't like at all. I didn't like being in front of the camera. So that changed, and then by the time I was, a teenager, and I was, into horror movies and sci-fi, and kind of a strange diet of Marvel Comics and great music from the 60s and early 70s. I lived in Rome, Italy. That's where I grew up. So,
Yeah.
Unlike being in the States where we'd be, even back then somewhat amused to death, we were, there was no television really. So entertainment was music and, whatever you could read, and then going to some great Italian cinema and sometimes the odd imported dubbed American film. Of course, I saw all those. And so as I sort of acquired this taste, for the movies that I've been making now forever, when it was time finally in the early 70s to go out and make my first movie, the training on set, my dad had me apprentice, when I was a little older, doing just about every job on a movie set. So I was very, now some of those jobs are obsolete today. I can look back and go, well, I don't need to ever worry about, hand numbering negative anymore, 35 negative, and some of the other strange tasks. But for the most part, everything that I was taught and everything that I, that he sort of had me, pay attention to, came in very useful because I kind of know it all. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean I know kind of.
Sure.
I can't be fooled,
Right.
Because, a lot of producers today really are more packagers. They'll find the material. If they have good taste, they'll be involved in putting the elements together, but they really wouldn't know what to do on a movie set as far as, whether it's operating the camera or moving things around or how to deal with, all the logistics so that you could. And today, more and more, you can almost be a one-man show. That's a separate conversation. So I was lucky to grow up on a set and have a wonderful father who taught me a lot, taught me how to, I think, treat people and work with people and have the right temperament to just get the job done. And then, in the 70s, I started making my own movies, and then it's been, I guess I became a film junkie because I just can't stop.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, obviously you're highly prolific, and really in the business, as far as I'm aware, there's really only people like Roger Corman and Lloyd Kaufman who have both similar careers. Corman has said on numerous occasions that he would very often notice trends and make similar films, and until the enthusiasm waned, and then he would move on to the sort of the next big thing, which is a simplification. But there's no such sort of pattern in your body of work, and in fact, you've stated before you don't believe there's necessarily a formula for making a good genre film. So what's been your motivation, and where do your ideas come from? How have you sort of continued to generate your career?
I enjoy the process, and things have changed dramatically. We're going through the biggest sea change ever in all my years of being involved in this business, which we'll talk about in a moment. But
sure.
It's at the end of the day, however the movie is delivered, I'm not sure exactly if it's a formula, but people. You have to recognize what you're making. I'm making, hopefully entertaining, little, escapism,
yeah.
horror, sci-fi, fantasy fare, and I don't take it too seriously. I try to wiggle sometimes some messages in there. If you notice, there are things that you've not seen in any of my movies. I've never made a slasher movie. It's just not my thing. I think the world is difficult enough. You can turn TV on if you want to watch stories about people stabbing and blowing people apart and cutting heads off, and there's nothing entertaining for me. The torture horror genre has never been my thing. I'm also a real avid non-smoker, so with few exceptions, you don't see people smoking in my movies. Not that there's anything wrong with it. If you want to smoke away. But there's a little stuff running through these films, and there are themes that I've repeated, and I sort of financing. Hopefully, with financing permitting one day, I'll tie a lot of the themes together because I like reaching back, pulling out characters from 20 years ago, bringing them back, and then I love the idea of teaming up the franchises. I've done that just a little bit because it's not so easy, and it depends on financing, and you kind of ebb and flow as the world changes, which it has enormously since I started in the 70s. It was all about 35 millimeter, and being a B movie on the B side of a double bill in the theater. There was no other revenue. There was no internet. There was no DVD, video, VOD, pay-per-view. All these delivery systems. There's none of that. You finished your movie and went to a distributor who hopefully treated you well, and they never did. And then he would get those prints made and shipped around the country, and you would share in the revenue from the ticket sales. And that was kind of that was the old school. And that's kind of what Corman was still doing when I, came into the fold. He was, he caught, and I guess I caught, of course, the tail end of what was a pretty cool business. You could take a exploitation movie out there, make a few dollars if you were clever, and that ended probably within 10 years of when I started distributing movies theatrically. Those days were over, and over for anyone, including Corman, who was like an amazing pioneer, and he's a great guy. He just is, I think he's about 20 years older than me, so he was when he was really kicking it, he was the world was very, very different, and he's still around doing his thing, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But what he knows and what he was a pioneer in, the B movie theatrical release, the drive-in theater, the grindhouse movie, that is literally a bygone era.
Yeah, I suppose the advent of video was its own new thing, as it was his own sort of new distribution challenge, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Well, to kind of bring us quickly to the moment, the current moment. What's really interesting for me, because you asked earlier about sort of the formula and the themes, and at the end of the day, whether it's a title or a piece of art tied to a high concept, of course, because we're making movies that live and die by the sort of high concept vibe of the title or the art and or the trailer. These are not movies driven by stars. They don't have theatrical exposure. I mean, some of them did in the 80s. We did release 30 of my movies, the Empire films, in the 80s theatrically, but that was at the very end of that era I was talking about. But it's kind of weird when you think that in the 70s, which was the end pretty much of the real great years of bringing exploitation movies as B movies into the theaters, what you relied on was a great poster, because that's how people went to their theater or their drive-in and got pulled into some lurid movie opening in a week or two. The trailer, which was sort of like the poster too. If you were lucky as a filmmaker, someone saw your trailer at the end of an A movie or another B movie and thought, "Wow, I want to see this movie with these half-clad hot chicks being, attacked by some horrible creature." And then you'd see the poster, which was even more lurid and promised so much. And we know, because we've talked to so many of these people, that they knew they were not going to ever see exactly what was in the poster or on the in the trailer, but the premise, if it worked, would bring a lot of people to those theaters, and a lot of them went to see these movies, the B movies, over the A film. I've heard from a lot of people, the A film, whatever the studio film, was okay, but we really wanted to see this lurid B movie. So our tools and the way we attracted people back when I began was the 30 by 40 theatrical poster, big canvas to put a lot of great stuff on, and the trailer. As we morphed into the video age, which up to recently fueled all of us and all of our endeavors, we reduced that poster to the size of a VHS box. So that was a challenge, because you can't do what you would do in a 30 by 40 poster in a little window that way. But, we adapted and worked with primary images, and it was still essentially the image, the mini poster in front of the box and the trailer that would bring people, to the video stores. And then we morphed from VHS to DVD, which sort of changed the configuration a bit, but essentially the same size, a little different layout, but same deal. Cover, art, good trailer, and hopefully you pull people into renting your movie. And then we started this era in the last 10 years or so of movies being available on pay-per-view and video on demand. And suddenly it wasn't even artwork driven; it was title driven. And not just title-driven, but what letter of the alphabet does your movie begin with? Because all these systems, Time Warner, all those systems back in the day and still today were new movies are released, you scroll through those titles alphabetically. And if your title was the first 6 or 8 letters of the alphabet or first 10, you're doing much better than having a title that began with, like, a P, because all the statistics show that as people scroll through it, by the time they're 6, 8, 10 letters into all the choices, they've made their choice. So suddenly it was not even a poster or a piece of art, because you don't see the art on these systems until you push, the movie that interests you, and then in theory, the little piece of art comes up and you can watch a trailer. Yeah. So that was bizarre, and now, of course, we're in a whole different world, which is a world I'm super, on the big flag waver, because it really is our future, and that's the world of streaming.
Yeah, I did want to talk about full moon streaming. I mean, I wanted to bring it up later on, just because it's fascinating and fantastic for sort of real genre fans to have that resource. I mean, especially as I think that slowly and surely you're seeing kind of Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and things like that, they'll eventually be taken over by the big guys again, like all these things are. So it's nice to have something like Full Moon streaming there, and you've got some great catalogs and things that that you have, but also you're acquiring. But a couple of questions just about some earlier movies. Obviously, as everyone is, and I'm sure you've been asked 100 times, your work you did with Stuart Gordon and the Barbara Crampton and Jeffrey Combs and things, just fantastic. Just briefly, what was that working relationship like, and what do you remember about putting together those films? Was it a fruitful heyday for you? Or?
I don't know if it was a heyday. I like to think there are a lot of heydays coming up, but it was, if I look back at the years that I've been making movies, certainly, the most, amongst the most sort of heady years were those few years where, Empire, my company, owned the Dino De Laurentiis Studios in Rome, Italy. It's a studio where movies like The Bible was shot, and Barbarella, and it was just a good, fortuitous bit of luck that the video business was booming, and I had a relationship with a bank, and the same bank that Dino was involved with, and next thing you know, my ambition of owning a studio, which today seems completely absurd, prevailed, and suddenly Empire owned the ex-Dino De Laurentiis Studios for about 4 years. And during those 4 years, then we really operated with, I guess to some degree, like, the dream someone has growing up in the business in the years that I grew up, which is, oh my God, wouldn't it be great to own a studio and shoot movies and go visit the sets and direct, and I'll have lunch at the commissary and have a wardrobe department, and just all that stuff became real.
Sure.
So for those years, those few years, it was, the sky was the limit. We had reasonable funding, we owned the studio, and most of all the Empire movies I shot, including just about everyone with Stuart, with one exception, Reanimator, were shot not in the United States. So we shot, Dolls there, and From Beyond, and later on in Italy, Pit and the Pendulum, and Castle Freak, and Robot Jock. So, owning that studio and having people like Schmuller, David Schmuller, and of course Stuart Gordon, and others, coming over and making movies like Troll and Crawl Space, and of course all Stuart movies. So those were very memorable years, because it was sort of, if I could go back, we would all do things a little differently. But until the bubble burst, which it did, those were amazing years. And working with Stuart and Jeffrey and Barbara and David Gale, and and all the wonderful effects guys. And this is back before CGI, so just about, well, not just about everything you've seen or see in those movies, were things we built and brought on set. And those were wonderful years, and I think the movies reflect that. And of course, it's always a little tricky, because the fans, who are pretty smart, they follow, they do. Now with the internet, there's so much information that you can, just the fact that now people can go on our site, or there's places where they can see IMDb, the movies I've made. There was always times years ago where no one quite understood that I was involved in so many films, because there was no real place to. There was no place to go check that out, or
right.
And so a lot of my earlier years was, did you make this, and how'd you make that, and what else have you made? And there's a lot of those questions. Now the fans can figure the whole thing out. It's well published, and at the end of the day, you can look at a body of work, but so much of this, and what makes it sometimes frustrating, is fueled by the finances at the time. So, of course, during those Empire years and the very, very early Full Moon years is when we had the most money relative to low-budget films to make films. And now we're making movies on about 10% of what those costs were. So as much as I'd like to make sequels to some of those movies, those ambitious films, you have to kind of work differently on a different canvas today because the finances are way, way different than what they were in the heyday of video when we had theatrical and we were really on a great roll. So for sure, those Empire years and the early years of Full Moon as well, because I built a studio in Romania, which still stands, and I was the first guy there, and we made a lot of wonderful films in the early to mid '90s outside of Bucharest.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sort of answers a couple of the questions I had. I mean, one of them was obviously any plans to sort of re-team with Stuart Gordon. I know they had their Nevermore project they were trying to get off the ground. And the other question, when I said you were coming on the show and I put it out online, a lot of my listeners and friends were commenting, and one of the most sort of repeated things, and I'm sure you hear this at conferences and conventions all the time, but was when or if they were going to see specifically these three series, Trances, Subspecies, and Ghoulies were the three that came up, and whether there was
I can answer that very easily. Trancers would love to do another Trancers. I've talked to Tim Thomerson. We have to figure out how to approach it. I mean, Tim is fantastic, but of course the last Trancers we made were 20 and close to 30 years ago, Trancers 1. So that's something that we're working on, trying to see how to best, because Tim's got to be, he's got to be the dude. I mean,
he's amazing.
Otherwise there's no reason to make it. As far as Subspecies, that's 100%. We have a great script. Ed Nicolau has written a wonderful and very ambitious script that up to now we've not been able to afford it. So, when exactly it gets made, it's going to be pretty soon because the fellow who plays Radu, Anders Hove, is committed, and Denise Duff, and we're sort of ready to go. It requires going back to Transylvania, Romania, which isn't what it used to be back in the early 90s. We had more money, and it was unbelievably inexpensive. We were sort of pioneers. But whether it's Transylvania or some other Eastern European country, where there's a will, there's a way, and it's top on our list. Ghoulies, it's unlikely. So I'm sorry to disappoint the Ghoulie fans. You never know. Maybe we can figure out a way. But there's so much on our plate, and we have a lot of new franchises that are doing very well that people enjoy, and that we don't want to abandon. And then of course the big focus here is building up our streaming site, because without that there will be no Full Moon. I mean, there are no video stores left in this country. So the model, the way this thing worked for years and years and years was, we would make a movie, we would get it out to Blockbuster in Hollywood and Tower and the Warehouse and all the different rental chains, and even a few years ago when things were already on the wane, there was still enough revenue to pull those dollars out and make another movie. Back in the early days, it was fantastic because then the rental business was huge, the dollars were greater, and that was all over the world. Now, those markets are either gone or mature. And the primary market, which is here in the U.S., is, it's over. It's not like, there's still a little left. There's like the occasional random little store out there that still rents videos. But, either you're in business with Redbox, which is, just by virtue of the fact that it's not a store, it's a machine, just means there's only a handful of titles getting in there. Or that's it. There's no other rental chains left. So our big focus is streaming, because once we build up a certain number of subscribers who are into our movies and into some of the other movies I'm bringing in, like the Grindhouse movies from Blue Underground, then we'll have, to some degree, strength in numbers and enough, much like Netflix, even though not to make the comparison, they're humongous and we're like these little ants. But, our streaming service is sort of like, it's similar to Netflix in that there's a very reasonable, depending on how many months you buy, but sort of a $6 a month fee.
Yeah.
And then you're able to look at, there's hundreds of Full Moon movies and the Grindhouse films and Wizard movies and Moonbeam films, and we put up a new movie literally every single workday of the week. So this is not just a stagnant sort of collection that you look, 2 weeks later it's the same stuff. Where it's a very vibrant, alive, sort of growing chock full of craziness, site. And I think we've caught a wonderful wave because, as I've been traveling and going to all these conventions, I've literally talked to not hundreds but thousands of people one-on-one, and there's a complaint out there that Netflix doesn't have a lot of the cool stuff they used to have, that there's less and less to watch.
I was about to say that, yeah, completely.
Even though I find that also kind of amazing. I mean, I've experienced that myself. I'll sit with my girlfriend and we'll be going for 20 minutes. We're trying to figure out what the hell movie to watch, and then we give up. Which is amazing because they have 18,000 movies, so it's like you can't find a movie.
I think it was more that when Netflix started out, people were in it or into, certainly the film geeks were into it because there was all this like B-movie or genre movie content. Gotcha. Now they're starting to make their own content. The studios are wising up, so the studios are filling up those 18,000 movies with all their stuff. And, the 80s and 90s or even the 60s and 70s kind of B-movies that we were all grooving on have gone, and therefore something like Full Moon is great for that, or will be great.
Yeah, well, that's our whole approach now. It is literally the campaign that is now sort of going to be in print and hopefully virally spreading the word is movies you won't find on Netflix. And people have told me, hundreds of them, that they're, aside from the fact that the price is going up at Netflix, that they just can't find the movies that they used to be able to find there. A lot of the movies that are in the exploitation genre, sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, and that's exactly what we're delivering.
Yeah.
So hopefully the message will go out there. One of the cool things is we've only been at this like 6 months. We're pretty new, but everyone who joins is very happy. We're getting an endless amount of letters and emails and tweets and like, oh my God, I love it. I can't stop watching it. There's so much content. And, in the business of being a subscription service, there's a certain fall off of subscribers. And I'm not sure exactly how to talk about the math, but the bottom line is very few people are unsubscribing, where we're like, people, once they get in there, they go, oh my God, it's the best $6 ever, and they stick around.
Yeah.
And, because we're just really vibrant and offering new content. And that's my mission. I mean, there's no other way for an independent. We're prolific. I have a library. I've been around for a while. But and that's why one of the labels I introduced, one of the sub-labels underneath Full Moon, is called Wizard Studios. I resurrected that label to welcome filmmakers, to people making movies today that have no shot at all. I mean, I feel so bad for someone. They make a hot little movie. It's a movie that 15, 20 years ago would have made a few $100,000. You would have taken it out on video, would have gone out to rental. Today, there's no way for these people to get into anything that will make them any money. I mean, they can produce 1,000 DVDs and try to sell them to friends or put it on Amazon, but those days are gone, unless you have some real exposure and you know how to get into some of the bigger systems. So what a Wizard is, and what I've done is create a way where, if someone's into it, they can submit the movie. Obviously, we're only picking up the ones that we feel are well-made enough and commercial enough, but so far I think we've picked up 6 movies out of maybe 80, 90, 100 that have been submitted. But once they're on the site, they get a certain amount of exposure, on the streaming site. And then, assuming the feedback is good, we'll take it out to whatever DVD is left, which is not a lot, but there's something there. We'll take it over to Hulu. We'll take it over to Time Warner, VOD, pay-per-view. We'll basically, as someone who's been around a lot of years, try to get it into every nook and cranny to earn some money. And even though the dollars aren't huge, there are at least some dollars coming back that we will, share with the filmmaker. And it's gone really well. I mean, this whole Wizard Studios initiative is new. But as kind of a humorous example, a few weeks ago, one of the submissions from a filmmaker, talented filmmaker in Missouri, was a movie called PMS Cop. Right. If you're familiar with Maniac Cop and all the rest of it, you just got to laugh. And the movie's very well made. The gal who plays the lead is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I thought, with a different piece of art, which we created, and a different trailer, this has a real potential. So we put it up a few weeks ago. We've gotten terrific response. A lot of people watched it. And now we are going to take it out on DVD. We are getting it into Hulu and Time Warner. And, again, it's not a lot of money, but we're pulling this movie sort of along with our knowing what we're doing kind of for the last 40 years into, some form of distribution, so it won't just sit there and kind of get lost, with a lot of other, independently made movies. So I'm excited about Wizard, which is one of the labels that you get when you subscribe. But of course, the main thing is Full Moon and hundreds of hours of behind-the-scenes footage, stuff I've done forever. Grindhouse, which I'm passionate grindhouse guy, and
Yeah.
a lot of movies I've acquired in the last year, and especially the Blue Underground, Bill Lustig's label.
Oh yeah, no, we spoke to Bill actually. In fact, I was helped host one of the Maniac Cop 2 screenings in New York when Bill was here. So
Okay.
yeah, no, Bill's a lovely guy.
Well, then you should definitely, and to people listening to this, you go over to Full Moon Streaming, support for $6 our awesome streaming site. Check out all the new Full Moon movies, and check out PMS Cop. I mean, it doesn't get more amusing than that. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, one film, just to tie it to the
Sure.
episode that we've got after this interview, we actually covered one of your Empire movies, Eliminators, from 1986.
Oh, sure.
And it was First question I had was, it's a fantasy action adventure film, seems to have wonderful mishmash of genres and a great diversity of characters and things. How did that project come to you, and what attracted you about it?
Well, with few exceptions, I've invented all these projects, so they don't come to me. They
Right.
come out of my head. And then, depending on the time, the budget, if I'm lucky enough to pull in a wonderful filmmaker, if I have the time to, direct it myself, the fate of so many of these movies depend on. It's just like a strange little, magic formula or potion that either works or doesn't. So in the case of Eliminators, it was luckily an idea that came to me when we had a reasonable amount of money, and otherwise, I mean, I could never attempt to make that kind of movie today, because it really is a precursor to sort of a superhero team-up film, which, even on a low budget is not easy to do. And back then, again, no CGI, so everything that we did had to be built. So we were shooting in Italy primarily. That was during those Empire years. And for whatever reason, I don't remember, but because it required a certain amount of locations and action-type scenes and pyro, there was a producer at one of the film markets who came to me who proposed that we partner up and shoot the thing in Spain. And, at that time I was working with Peter Manoogian. He and I go back many years, and Peter was also a production manager on a lot of our films. And, I had the idea of these sort of superhero characters, and I sketched out the storyline. I knew who the characters were. I thought the title was great. I always started with a piece of art, so there was a preliminary piece of art way before the project existed.
Yeah, the poster's great.
Yeah, thanks. And, we cobbled it together and sent Peter off to Spain with a bunch of our effects guys and the actors. And I do remember that what we were promised and working in Spain was not what sort of happened. So it was a troubled shoot, took many more weeks, not days, than we expected or could afford. And I had my dad go over there, who was sort of my right arm veteran, guy who was at that time, involved in a lot of productions. And it got so crazy by the third or fourth week, because I pretty much sent the A team. I had Mac Alberg, who was our ace director of photography, involved in the project. And I finally had to fly over there because I was in Italy on some of the Empire shoots at our studio, but I had to go over there to really try to assess what the story was and to try to rein this thing in, because it really was kind of spinning out of control. Not the director's fault, just, what was promised in Spain was just not happening. And anyway, we eventually wrapped it, and it was way more expensive than we had bargained for. And then, like all the other movies during that era, we had an obligation to take it out theatrically, which we did. And like all Empire films, we never made a penny. We lost a little money because the theatrical business was in trouble anyway in the 80s. And the reason why we did this was to give more of a profile to the VHS release, to the home video release. And that's sort of what fueled those, direct-to-video releases, was having some theatrical exposure. We released Eliminators, I think, with 1,000 prints. It wasn't a small little play. I mean, we were out there with movies like Eliminators and Troll and Reanimator and others. It all started with Ghoulies, of course, and, we gave it quite an exposure in the theaters. But I do remember, the good, the bad, and the ugly making that movie.
Yeah.
And then when I finally looked at it not that many years ago, I thought, for still a tiny amount of money back before all the tricks existed that exist today to say, cut corners and do crazy things, it's a fun little film, and nothing quite like it, prior. Now, since then, there's been dozens of big $100 to $200 million studio tentpole movies that work in that arena with all the money in the world. They generally can do a much better job. But it was a fun show. And one little anecdote, which, Denise Crosby was in it, who was wonderful and got a big gig on TV. But what most people don't know is that fellow who played the mandroid, the dude in the chair. The actor was named, his name is Patrick Reynolds.
Yeah.
The nicest guy ever, and the heir, or one of the heirs to the Reynolds tobacco fortune. And what I remember, like it was yesterday, is how much of an avid non-smoker he was. He contributed to non-smoking organizations. He talked about it endlessly, and I just thought, wow, what a trippy guy. He's the heir to, one of the heirs to the Reynolds tobacco fortune, and he's just a super non-smoker.
Yeah. That's fantastic. We always thought it's actually a really great effect in the movie when he takes off the caterpillar tracks from the tank attachment and then like puts his legs on and starts walking around. It's a great effect in the movie.
Yeah, we had to build all that. Today it's so much easier, but back then the CGI didn't exist, so nor did the internet, so we had to build all this stuff.
Yeah, but it's kind of why those movies, in a weird way, certainly with us sort of 30-something film nuts, it's why those movies survive, where some of the more sort of CGI-heavy ones don't in some way, because we're kind of... We have the nostalgia built in, but we also have the fascination of how things work and how things are put together and all that sort of stuff.
No, so. Sure. Well, I'm with you there, and no, it's a wonderful business, and there are those great moments in between the struggle and worrying about money and how markets change and how we're evaporating into the digital world. The physical world is all but gone, certainly for entertainment.
Yeah.
There's still the joy of creating something even with a small budget that works or resonates, or even a moment in a movie, and it's part of what makes it still, for me, very exciting. And again, I'm a big flag waver of our film and streaming venture, because without that, there really is no way to connect or reconnect with the fans who love these movies. They're not going to find them at their local video store, because there is no local video store.
Right. So, and I know some of those Empire titles are out on, is it Shout Factory or Scream Factory and things like that? How many of those Empire titles and obviously like Full Moon titles are you going to get sort of online eventually? I mean,
pretty much everything. I have the rights to all but a handful of movies. Sometimes some of those rights still revert back in a year or two, but most of them have already reverted, and all you have to go to Full Moon Streaming, and even without subscribing, just to check it out, and you'll see there's just so much content. And one more thing that I've done, which I'm proud of, and fans really dig, especially on the sort of nostalgia meter, is I was the first guy in '89, '90 doing the behind the scenes, back in the VHS days. So
those little videos, the
Video Zone, I mean, that was, and I remember arguments I had with Paramount, who was the distributor at the time, where I would say, well, listen, I want to, after the movie, this is VHS, so there's no, you don't skip around or push a button. You had to watch the movie and scroll or wind past the end credits to watch the Video Zone.
Yeah.
So they could not understand why I wanted to spend money and time, and they had to spend a few extra pennies with more VHS tape to put this Video Zone on. And we had this huge meeting, me, my one sort of helper at the time, and about 20 of them, and the basic question they had was, how do we monetize this Video Zone? And I'd explain, sometimes it's not just about money. I think the fans will dig it. And anyway, I started doing these Video Zones in the early days of Empire, which became very popular. We got tons of letters, not emails, letters, about how much they loved the Video Zone. So and then of course years later, DVD, and everyone's doing, making of, behind the scenes, added value. But I've never stopped doing them. So I was allowed back in the early days only about 10 minutes of tape past the feature length of the movie, or past the feature of the film, to do the making of. So, whereas I would shoot 4 or 5 hours of material on a shoot, to kind of get the footage I needed, the cut down or the making of all those movies was about 10, 15 minutes. But I kept all that raw footage. So one of the cool features on streaming is we have something called the Vault, and you go there, and we're putting this stuff up literally every day. We have just eventually, I don't know how many hours, lots and lots and lots and lots of hours of raw footage. So if you're interested in Puppet Master, Subspecies, or Transfers, or whatever it is, you can go and actually not watch you can watch the cut down too, it's there too, but then you can watch all the raw footage, which, it's like fascinating, stuff that I haven't seen for 20, 30 years, because I would give it to an editor, they'd edit down kind of 10 fast minutes of how the movie was made, and that's all I remember, because, who has time to look back? But now we have all that raw footage up there. It's just an added sort of value to someone who's on streaming anyway. So, the streaming is the whole thing here. I make people crazy. That's all I want to talk about. So
yeah, no,
I apologize.
No, I've got a friend of mine who's another show that I occasionally guest on, and he's an enormous fan of yours and a fan of Full Moon and so on. And he was singing the streaming praises, and we've both been sort of on each other and talking about it and stuff. So yeah, no, it's definitely
well, it's like it's like a club. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes when I'm at the last show I was at last weekend, I would hold up my iPad as I was walking around in front of our booth, signing people up and showing people what the site looks like. Now, luckily, almost everyone's on Netflix, so they get it. It's not like they have to understand what a subscription streaming site is, and a lot of them are very disenfranchised with sort of what's not on Netflix anymore. So it's become an easier and easier sell. And then when they figure out that it's like $6, it's like, and I show them all this stuff on them. It's sort of a mind blower. And I hold up this little iPad sometimes to say, something. This is the video store of the future. This is our video store. It's all here. Yeah. It's all right here. And well, then of course the next question is, well, okay, computer, iPad, I get it, but where are you? Else are you? And I said, well, we're on Roku, which is an awesome device, so you can look at it on your flat screen. We'll be on Xbox later this month, PlayStation, smart TVs, Apple AirPlay. So it's just about any way you would stream a movie on your flat screen. It's, you can find us, and Roku's been really great so far. About half of our subscribers are on Roku.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of people, they just say, hey, I'm on a lunch break or on a train or whatever. I got my iPad, I'm watching all this stuff. It's great because a lot of these movies I haven't seen since, I was, a kid going to the local video store.
No, it's fantastic, and when you look at I know that when I used to have a cable subscription, it was over $100 you were paying a month, and you could subscribe to 10 streaming sites for that and still not spend $100 a month.
Oh yeah,
so it's fantastic, and I only really I have to say I only really watch kind of movies, to be honest. I'm not big into the TV series so much, so it's fantastic for someone like me. But two more from the listeners and fans online. Sure. I just wanted to make sure I got them. One was, what's been your most sort of challenging production out of your sort of 40 years in the business, either in terms of filming complications, special effects, or whatever?
Well, wow.
I mean,
that's almost like when people ask, "What's your favorite movie?" And it's hard to say because I've got a lot of favorite movies of almost 300 films I've made. So there's one doesn't really jump out. I mean, there are a few that jump out, but every movie has its challenges. And obviously back in the day when the projects were maybe a little more ambitious because there was a little more money to make them, I've always gone further than I need to. Roger Corman has a great reputation of just knowing when to cut, and he's really good at saying no, and I don't say no too well. So I figure, well, if it makes the movie a little better and costs a little more money, why not? And that's in a way been my downfall a bit, because you do that enough and then you can go broke. So I haven't been broke yet exactly, or I mean, I've been close because sometimes the money dries up. So. These pictures are challenging, but I always want to try to do the best I can for the film, especially movies that then become part of the library, become part of my body of work. So it's easier to give the movie a little more, and in doing so, sometimes you create problems, and there are movies that had problems. I mean, if I could pick one out of the hat, I made a movie a million years ago in the late 70s called The Day Time Ended. I'm a big stop-motion animation freak, and
Sure.
Dave Allen was, involved with these movies at the time, and I made the mistake of sending the crew off to, and it was an expensive little shoot, to the desert somewhere where everyone had to be put up at a local hotel, and without going into detail or naming names, it just went on and went over budget, and the director, I'm sure he meant well, but basically it just took a long time, and that cost a lot of money that I couldn't afford, and that was a real troubled production. And then, of course, once it was done, unlike most movies, you can try to finish it in 60 or 90 days and get it out and recover some money. But then we owed all these stop-motion shots, which took probably another 8 months. So, by the time the thing was done and able to be released, it was, I don't know, it's a miracle we survived that. But, there are other stories that are similar where you
Sure.
set out and try to do the best you can, and conditions, that you don't expect change, and the next thing you know, you're in trouble. So there's enough of those as well. And there are ones that go very smooth and easy.
And you've got your book out, of course, the Empire book and Delirium magazine, so I'm sure they're chock full of those kind of stories.
Well, Empire especially, because, again, the wonderful writer, Dave J., who wrote it, they're originally going to do a book about everything up to the current sort of stuff I'm doing, but the publisher, they looked at it, they figured it'd be 1,000-page books. Right. They said, well, we can't do that, so they wanted to do a two-parter. So obviously Empire ends in 89. When Empire ended, and then I started Full Moon. And, Delirium is great. I should have mentioned it. It's Chris Alexander, who's the editor of Fangoria, is the editor, and I think it's a real passion project because it is a horror magazine, but it's a little more from the viewpoint of filmmakers as opposed to being just a horror magazine. And I think what the movies we're choosing, and a bunch of them have nothing to do with Full Moon, just as fans, the movies that we're sort of delving into, finding footage or photos that no one's seen. And, one thing I forgot to mention, what's fun about streaming, just as one more note, is because I really believe in it so much and I want people to feel really good about it, part of why we've been successful in signing up so many people so quickly is what we're giving away. So at every show or online, if you sign up for streaming for $18, it's 3 months, $6 a month. We give you free 3 DVDs or 3 Blu-rays. So I've expanded that a bit at the convention. So people will sign up. They're already signed up to a great thing. It's only $6 a month, $18, and they're walking away with 3 or 4 DVDs or Blu-rays. So they're, up front they're getting a great deal. And a lot of people say, well, Charlie, that doesn't sound like a good deal for you if you're giving us $40, $50 of merch for $18 sign up. And I said, well, I'm betting on you loving the site and sticking around. That after 3 months, you'll say, for $6, there's so much cool stuff here. I'm just going to stick around.
And you have the option, obviously, to just have an ongoing subscription. You don't have to keep renewing.
Yeah. Once you sign up, It's like any subscription. It rebills at $6.99 a month, or you can buy a year for. If you buy a whole year, it's like $5 a month. It's super cheap. So or you can.
Oh, that's a good option.
Yeah. So if you buy 12 months, it's it gets cheaper, and then 3 months, and then if you just do month to month, it's $6.99. So that's the most you'll ever spend. So, but we give away all these gifts, which is kind of cool.
Well, look, thanks ever so much. I feel like I've kept you twice as long.
But it's okay. That's all right. It's a pleasure talking to you, and I'm excited about the what we're doing. So hopefully people listening to this go to fullmoonstreaming.com and sort of rediscover the movies that freaked them out.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks ever so much, Charles.
All right, thank you, John. Take care.
Pleasure. Bye now.
Bye.
From the folks that bring you the blogs at nerdlunch.net and cavalcadeofawesome.net, it's the Nerd Lunch Podcast. Join CT, Jeej, Pax, and the ever-rotating fourth chair every week covering a variety of topics in movies, TV, comic books, fast food, snacks, and more. Nerd Lunch is available from iTunes and nerdlunch.net.
Hi, my name's Chris, and I've got Steven Seagal on the old dog and bone. Steven.
Yes.
Have you ever desired to hear a weekly movie podcast hosted by two fellows from the northeast of England who run their little hands through the week's movie news and then cap it off with a review or two, ranging from all sorts of genres: kung fu, anime, straight-to-video tomfoolery, bit of horror?
No.
Well, you're a dick who doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't even know why I'm asking you. I'm sure there's other people out there who have desired to hear such a thing, so if you're one of those lovely people, pop on over to wafufm.com. That's WAFUFM.com, and check out the show. You can also find us on iTunes, TalkShoe, and Facebook at facebook.com/wafublog. Wafu FM. It's a podcast that's good and stuff. Shut up, Stephen.
This is going to be a really unique episode for the both of us because we're talking about two movies which we don't have any real emotional depth, real connection to. It's not like if you told me today that you hated one of these movies, I'd be like, well, I don't necessarily feel that way, but I'm not passionate enough about it to argue too much.
Right. But no, we just, I definitely liked one more than the other.
I think it's safe to say that one is better than the other, and I feel pretty confident that we both know which one that is.
Yeah, so, but no, in terms of, passionate, no, not at all. Couldn't care less, really. Either way. But anyway, let's start the show. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the After Movie Diner. And with me in the diner this week, we have, well, a man, a legend, just a internet icon. His name is whispered in hushed tones along the corridors of the mighty and powerful. His Paul McCartney impression has gone down in history as one of the top 10 things one should never ever hear again. And just in general, he's an all-round fount of useless information and wonder. Will you put it all together, please, repeatedly, and then wipe it off cleanly for Mr. Douglas Tilley? Good evening, sir.
Oh, thank you. My full name, my full first name. You know, I might actually get into the habit of asking people to refer to me by my full first name. What do you think?
I like it. What's the middle name? Because they could go the full hog and go for...
My middle name, and I wish I could come up with something funny, but it's Alexander.
Okay, so Douglas Alexander Tilley. You almost... the Tilley kind of lets you down, but...
Oh, no, wait, I got something extra for you. My father's name was Douglas Tilley, and my grandfather's name was Douglas Tilley, so we can fix the Tilley with the third.
Ah, and then you could sound like a founding father or something. Douglas Alexander Tilley III.
I thought I would sound like one of the snobby rich kids in one of those comedies in the 80s. It's like, I'm Douglas Alexander Tilley III. How dare you nerds come onto my property?
Yes. I will throw money at you in disgust. And,
I never... But yes, that's exactly right. We're going to talk about my name for the next 90 minutes or so.
We are Douglas Alexander Tilley III, and I am, of course, Johann Whipsnade Puff Piff Puff Piffity Puff Cross the Fourth. Anyway, to be honest, my improvising gland is not fully oiled yet. It's been a long day. Anyway, so and tonight we're in the diner, of course. So what will you be ordering, sir?
You know, it's we're ordering movies. Is that correct? Is that what's happening here?
No, I was going to do some fake thing about what food you would order if we were in a diner. You are, of course, from the great cold white north of Canada.
And I'm from the Rock, Newfoundland itself, the farthest eastern point in North America.
Indeed. So would you have like a lot of fish, I suppose? There'd be a lot of fish.
That would be rather stereotypical, John, and I wouldn't expect you to go there. You know what?
Well, I mean, I couldn't think of what else it would be. Like, what, Tim Hortons or something? I have no idea.
Come on now. In Newfoundland, they have what's called Jig's Dinner. It's the most popular thing that Newfoundlanders have.
Yeah.
They have every Sunday, and it's a dinner that's composed of a lot of vegetables and salt meat, and the vegetables are all boiled together in a big pot, and it is fucking awful.
Yeah, well, I mean, because a lot of Newfoundlanders, I don't know how to say it, Newfoundlanders.
Not like that.
No. Newfoundlanders, if I'm going to, I have no idea. Anyway, Newfoundlanders, Newfoundlanders, New Londoners, a lot of those guys were Irish and Scots immigrants. Exactly. And, of course, Irish and Scots love to put everything together in a bag and boil it for days. So that makes quite a lot of sense.
They're a hearty bunch, and they were raised on food that was expected to get them through these long winters. And the idea is that it's no matter what you have, you can make a meal out of it. And what they always had was root vegetables. So that's what they still. Even though now you can go to the grocery store or whatever, get whatever you want. No, they're still going to stick to the horrible, bland, awful shit that they grew up with.
Yeah, you can make food out of it or sex aids. Root vegetables are good for either one, I think. Especially,
you can do things with cauliflower these days. I didn't have a lot of imagination as a kid, but now you can go in any hole that you have.
I was thinking more carrots, parsnips, more the traditional root vegetables. But
you're not using your imagination. That's where the term deflowered came from, was from cauliflower.
Indeed. I don't believe you for a second, but it may well be. Would you have a Jig's dinner, and then would you, I don't know, stereotypically smear it with poutine or something?
Now you're both out of line and completely off base. I grew up never having had poutine.
Listen, I know about 6 things about Canada, okay? One of them is poutine.
One of them is me.
Yeah, one of them is you. One of them is Kids in the Hall. One of them is Trailer Park Boys. One of them is The Tragically Hip. Yeah. I mean, I love Canada, but at the same time, I've never been there, and I've never bothered to learn anything more about it than those things I just listed.
Well, I think actually that might be a good thing because you love it. But if you learned a lot about it, maybe you wouldn't love it as much, and we would prefer you be ignorant and love it than be informed and hate it.
Well, I know that the Queen is still on some of your money, which I like, and
she's our Queen.
She is technically your Queen, yeah technically, and as you're still part of the Commonwealth, tangentially, in the same way that Australia is. But so there's that going for you, and I know that you have a parliament, you have a British parliamentary system, and I know that you have free healthcare, and I know that people like to jump over the border and steal all your drugs and then jump back down again. Yeah,
to be honest, you've pretty much covered everything there is. Hockey, that's another thing.
Hockey, yeah, of course, hockey. I could say words like Edmonton Oilers and sound like I know what I'm talking about, or Toronto Maple Leafs and sound like it's something, but I don't really know what I'm saying.
It's actually funny that you're talking about Canada right now, because one of the films being covered on this very show was made here in Canada.
Look at you trying to get it, to try to segue into the movies and get it away from your home country.
I was so pleased. By the way, Newfoundland is not like the rest of Canada, and nobody in Canada would argue that fact. It is, in terms of its food, it's much closer to Europe and
of
certainly.
But you don't live in Newfoundland now, do you?
That's true. I live in Ontario, the land of, well, I wouldn't call it the land of poutine. People in Quebec would probably get very upset at me. But
people in Quebec, this is another thing I know. People in Quebec get upset about everything. I know that much.
I'm glad you said it. But now I'll say it too. Yes, they get upset at everything. And they particularly dislike, my understanding is, they particularly dislike Newfoundlanders because Newfoundlanders are... they're unlikely to speak French.
Right. Yeah, well, why would you bother? Why would you care?
It's a hideous language. I mean, I don't want to make a generalization, but it's pretty much the worst thing you'll ever hear.
Yes.
I was actually talking about this with my wife just a couple days ago, which is that Quebec French is so terrible that even people in France think it's terrible, right?
Of course.
It's sort of like gutter version of French. So I mean, I don't want to, again, no generalizations. I don't want to say anything controversial on this show, but really, let's just wipe Quebec off the face of the planet.
Yeah.
Right, fill it with coffee or something.
Yeah, annex it, or it could secede from the Canadian Union.
You're joking, John, but that's happening right now. That argument is happening.
Of course it is. That argument's happening everywhere because human beings are idiots.
That happened 20 years ago. There was a referendum about Quebec sort of seceding, I guess would be the word, from Canada. But that argument has reignited right now today. They have a leader who is a Bloc Québécois leader who is interested in getting that argument kind of back on the table.
I think Rob Ford needs to go up there and give some of them his crack, and then then they can all chill the fuck out.
Because that's what crack is known for, is chilling people the fuck out.
Hey, look, it gets his work done. So anyway, I have no idea what I'm talking about now. I'm just rambling nonsense at this
You just got to say the name Rob Ford and make a couple of references to crack, and that's height of comedy.
It is. It's just it's all that needs to happen. He is both wonderful and awful in equal measure. He is everything that is wrong with the world and everything that is right with it.
I'm actually kind of privileged because I live in Peterborough, which is about an hour and a half away drive from Toronto. I just got back from Toronto, in fact.
Yeah.
So I get to both the most hilarious aspects of it, having to be directly affected by the decisions he makes and the actions he partakes in.
Yeah. And I wanted to say just a big congratulations to you and your good lady. 5 years today. That's fantastic. Well done.
5 years. Yes, that's it.
You are now a Bowie song, officially.
That's right.
You can dress yourself up as Ziggy Stardust or Aladdin Sane and pounce on her from the top of the wardrobe, or whatever it is that you want to do. It's all there for you.
John Cross, do you have a webcam in my apartment? It sounds like you might.
I do actually. Yes, I got Mo to install it surreptitiously.
Well, Mo, not surreptitiously. Mo's webcam is beloved in my apartment.
Okay, good. That's all right then, as long as you know about it. And I love it. Except you guys dance too much. If you guys could stop the dancing, that would be That'd be great. It's the dancing that's really disturbing, especially when you're in a tutu and you've got a Viking helmet on and there's some creepy music in the background.
Suggestion noted and ignored.
Fantastic. So yes, Doug, as you mentioned, let's get back to it. So you're going to order a Jigs dinner tonight, even though you find it repellent. And I'm going to order, well, I've just had, actually, in a diner, 2 large glazed pork chops and some potatoes and carrots.
Oh.
So, I might as well be eating that right now. If the audience can go there in their mind and imagine Douglas and myself sat across from each other in a velveteen booth talking over a diner table. It probably wouldn't be velveteen, probably leatherette, wouldn't it? But either way, I like velveteen just for the word.
I hope we have our own private jukebox that we can
on the
order
table?
up. Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Sure.
Maybe
I mean, if I had a budget, we could actually order some famous songs, but I don't. If you want to order any of my songs, you can, but I doubt you know any of the names of them. So.
Oh, are you kidding me? That one that you did recently, that I love so much, that's the one that you should play for us.
The one that I did recently that you
Yes.
love so much.
That one. How did it go again?
I don't know, sir, but
I think it went bop, 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 like that.
Are you being serious? Because I honestly don't know what it is you're talking about.
Oh wait, actually, I just realized that the song I was just singing was "I Think I Love You" by the Partridge Family.
Yeah, I think that's what it was you were singing, and it had nothing to do with me. Did you know that you can, however, find my entire back catalogue of music at miskplumbingfixtures.bandcamp.com. Albums available for sale now.
Sorry, what was that? What was that website again?
That was MISC, as in the shortening of miscellaneous.
Oh.
Plumbing, as in what plumbers do. Fixtures, as in things they do things to. And
Very good.
.bandcamp.com, which is a band which is slightly effeminate and maybe prancing about a little bit. .com. Yeah.
Well, I think everyone should check that out.
I think everyone should check that out. Yes, indeed. Just because I do great album covers, that's why they should check them out.
Right.
My album covers are second to none. I can't guarantee the music is, but the album covers are top notch. Mm-hmm. So check that out. And so, yes, Douglas, why don't you take it away and tell us which 2 fantastic movies from 1986 are we doing, and why are we doing them in the order that we're doing them?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you've introduced me to introduce these movies, John, because this is very much a collaborative effort in terms of choosing what those movies would be.
It was, and it was perfect because I had every intention.
Like, I didn't even know how perfect it was going to be until we watched them, and it was like, this is perfect.
I know they even have sort of similar endings in a weird way.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah,
and they one of them is a movie I had never seen before. And the other is a movie that I grew up with and have a lot of strong nostalgic feelings, which is why I recommended it. And that movie, the first one we will be covering, is 1986's Eliminators.
Right, which came out when, sir, in 1986?
January 31st, 1986. Directed by Peter Manoogian, who also went on to work for Full Moon, because Charles Band produced this film.
This was an Empire Pictures release.
That's exactly right, because it's before Full Moon existed. And Peter Manoogian also went on to direct another one of my favorite, and I think this was also for Empire, films of the 80s, which is Arena. And I'm sure some of the listeners are very familiar with that movie. And that's a kind of movie that has the same sort of nostalgic feelings kind of connected with me. But that one came a bit later in the decade. But this one, and should I do a full introduction now, or should I talk about the second movie?
Well, let's say what the second movie is. Let's go on and say what it is. But I wanted to say not the Arena that has Pam Grier in.
No.
Even though the next movie we're going to mention has Pam Grier in.
Everything's coming together.
Except you and me. That happens later in private.
But we will record it and edit it, and at the end. The second film we're going to be covering today is 1986's, also 1986's, The Vindicator, which was released on the 14th of February, 1986, because it's a very romantic movie, a good way to celebrate your Valentine's Day. The Vindicator, directed by Jean-Claude Lord, and filmed in Montreal, Canada.
Yes, indeed. And what a fantastic movie. This was one that came up sort of, to my knowledge, when I was doing all the Pam Grier episodes and I was looking through her sort of 80s and 90s thing, we were also doing a list for Dr. Action and the Kick-Ass Kid of like top 20 kind of B-list action guys kind of thing, like second tier action guys, and I wanted to throw Grier in there, and I was looking at her 80s output, and of course this one was one of the big ones that I came across, and I sort of put it on the back burner of my brain and went, I must watch that at some point. So this was a perfect opportunity to do that, considering it is also, much like Eliminators, features a man-borg or a mandroid or a cyborg or whatever you want to call it.
Watching The Vindicator from the perspective of someone in 2014 is a pretty fascinating experience because of where it's positioned in terms of kind of pop culture popularity at that time, because it's post-Terminator but pre-RoboCop, but it has it feels very much of that era where people were really interested in all of that cyber shit.
It has the great Canadian actor Maury Shaken in it.
I love his before he passed away, he got a really amazing part in a movie called Whale Music here in Canada, and people kind of all of a sudden just kind of clicked into the fact that he was an amazing actor, had been doing it for years and years, and always gave great performances, and it was a shame because he just passed away a few years after that.
Yeah.
So we are going to be covering these movies chronologically because it's actually kind of incredible that not only do these movies have some similar subject matter, at least when it comes to robotics, but they also were released within 2 weeks of one another.
Yeah.
And it's
and prior to RoboCop, you were saying.
Yes, indeed. Terminator came out a few years before. RoboCop would come out a year later. And there are elements, you can see that was kind of the zeitgeist at the time. People were really interested in all this kind of cyber stuff. But there's one movie that The Vindicator really reminds me of. And maybe we'll wait till we actually end up talking about it to bring this up, because maybe it was just me, but it was a movie that kind of kept coming to mind when I was watching it.
Sure, and it's directed by Jean-Claude Lord, who I've actually seen another one of his movies, as it was on Netflix recently, and features none other than Mr. William Shatner, and that is,
Visiting
of course,
Hours.
The wonderful movie Visiting Hours, which is just quite fantastically ridiculous. What I like to call a sweaty slasher, because Michael Ironside, who's the main criminal in it, does spend an inordinate amount of the time sweating in a series of unappealing outfits.
That's one of his most unhinged performances. He's so great in it.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to see Visiting Hours on 16mm a couple of years ago in a theater.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that movie, because here's the thing about especially Canadian horror of the late 70s, early 80s, is it's not that it's necessarily cheap looking, but it has this sort of weird grittiness to it that feels like almost an American movie from 7 or 8 years before.
Right, yeah.
So even well into the 80s, Canadian movies were still looking like that, like as if they were made on kind of cheaper film. So Visiting Hours on 16mm just looked perfect. It was exactly like you dug it out of somebody's home movies, and Michael Ironside's performance really goes along with that too. If you haven't checked it out, I think there's actually a Blu-ray of Visiting Hours out
Wow.
there.
Because he's still a little overweight in the role, because he's younger and he's a little podgier, and it's just very unappealing. He just sweats a lot. And isn't there a point where he's just in like a pair of kind of tight underoos?
Yes, indeed, there is.
Yeah, it's really unappealing in every possible way, but still a cracking movie. And I feel Mr. Jean-Claude is 2 for 2 in terms of the films I've seen of his. I like The Vindicator very much.
Well, I know some people out there have probably seen Eddie and the Cruisers 2, Eddie Lives, and that might be, if that was part of your view of his oeuvre, you might think that he would be 2 for 3 in that case.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay, so we're going to dash back in time then 2 weeks to the 31st of January and start off with with Eliminators, which is a Charles Band-produced Empire Pictures release of a Peter Manoogian.
That's how I pronounced it, and it looks like that's how it should be pronounced.
Yeah, Manugian film Eliminators. And I think together we've got to try and explain what the fuck goes on in this movie, because it's kitchen sink movie making, isn't it? It's throw everything into the pot and accept the kitchen sink and see what happens, isn't it?
That's very, very fair. And I also think that it's a movie that was very much of its time. Both of these movies are, but this one in particular, if you're looking at it through the perspective of a sugar-addled kid, you know?
You said that to me, and it does work.
Yeah.
It does work that way, yeah.
Because if I was and I was a kid, I was 5 when this movie came out, though I would have encountered it on VHS probably a couple of years later. And that cover, that poster for Eliminators, which I think is one of the greatest posters that has ever been made for anything.
It is a fantastic poster, and it's a crime that IMDb seemingly doesn't have it for some weird reason. It has loads of behind the scenes shots of Patrick Reynolds.
Right. But you're right.
Standing around.
But, I mean, you can find that poster easily enough. It's really just the characters all kind of coming towards you. But the whole design of it, and it's painted, and it's kind of this beautiful, the color scheme is perfect. But what I was going back to about the kind of the sugar-addledness, when I was a 7 or 8-year-old, I gave a shit about probably a handful of things. And those things included robots, kung fu, dames.
Right, exactly. Dames, because you were born in the 1940s.
That's exactly right.
I like some dames, see? That's my impression of you at the age of 5. Mama, I want to go see some dames.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I sounded like. Exactly. That was a little uncanny there for a moment.
You sound like a cross between Bogart and Jimmy Cagney fighting for space. Yeah,
I loved all those things, and I also loved kind of rogue badasses like Han Solo. So you throw these elements all into a mix, and I also really loved Man on a Mission type movies, which there was a ton of them around that time period. And you throw that mix together, and you come up with something that shouldn't work, and in a lot of ways doesn't work. But I love the fact that they commit to it so entirely in Eliminators, which features as really its lead character a mandroid, which is their version of an android man, or I guess an android always involves some portion of a man, who can basically remove his legs and mount himself onto a tank.
Yeah.
Which
it's
allows
onto a caterpillar, isn't it? It's onto a caterpillar tracks, yeah.
And that's on the poster. And you might think, looking at the poster, it's like, yeah, well, this is the fucking poster. But when I watch the movie, it's not going to be anything like that. But that's in the movie.
It's done really well. Like, it's not too clunky. Like, it actually works.
Rewatch now. This is the first time I've watched Eliminators in probably 15 years. And it really does work well, to the point where sometimes I was kind of a little confused about how the actor was like in this machinery, because he has to be leaned in a very uncomfortable way.
Yeah, well, he can replace his arm. He has multiple attachments onto his arm socket that some fire lasers, some fire, one's a magnet, right? One's magnetic,
right?
But I never understood where he was keeping all these other arms. He just pulled them round from out of his ass, basically, like pulled them up out of his back and screwed them on, and there was always a different setting. And I sort of thought to myself, considering how big and clunky his arm attachments were, could they not have had all three things in just one attachment? Did he have to keep taking it on and off? But
no, they absolutely had to. I can't explain why, but they definitely had to.
And like the whole cumbersome thing that rather than just building tracks that he could, I don't know, stand on or sit on, he had to take his legs off. He had to like embed himself into it. I mean, that would have just taken so much time and wouldn't have really been combat appropriate.
There's a great, somewhat disturbing part where he has to dismount from these treads, and he has to attach his legs to himself so he can walk off of it. And it's really well done. And I don't know, like, it seems that like so much thought was put into that, which is kind of amazing when you think about how kind of thrown together a lot of these elements are. Like when you have your kung fu representative as someone who literally just shows up.
Yeah, just shows up. He's just a ninja. And it's mainly so that they can have the tagline of the movie, Mandroid, Mercenary, Scientist, Ninja, each one a specialist. Together they are Eliminators. And it's really just... It's just so that they
sound
can
like a cartoon, right?
It does completely sound like a cartoon, or like an amazing version of the A-Team.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of Eliminators that feels like the pilot of a TV show more than a real movie.
I guess so. I mean, this is my first time watching it. I dug it completely as a movie. I loved the cast. You've got Andrew Prine as Harry Fontana, which is just a fantastic name, of course.
Yes, it is.
Denise Crosby, the wonderful Denise Crosby, as Nora Hunter, which is fantastic, which is another similarity with The Vindicator. Because there's also a character in that movie played by a famous actress called Hunter. So that's very interesting. Patrick Reynolds is just simply Mandroid. And Conan Lee plays Kuji, or in this case, the ninja. And then the wonderful Roy Dotrice, who is still on Game of Thrones, had a cameo in Angel as Wesley's
father.
dad.
Yeah, that's right.
And is also... Oh, he was also in something else that I'm aware that I was very aware of. But he's a fantastic actor. I love. Oh, Amadeus. He plays Mozart's father in Amadeus, of course.
Yes, I mean he has this amazing voice, and I guess it's one of those voices that are kind of made for playing villains in a lot of ways. It almost feels like he's sort of slumming it here, but you almost need that sort of operatic level of bad guy to go up against these guys.
Yeah. I love that he was in a TV series. I've never heard of it at all, but called Madigan Men, and he played Seamus Madigan. I can only imagine that Madigan Men was like some rough and tumble band of crazy Irishmen. I hope so, anyway. Yes, Gabriel Byrne was in it.
Right. Let's not look into it any further, because your thought of what it should be like is almost too perfect.
Yeah. You know what I mean, though? It should be like, we are Madigan men. Dun, 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 dun. Like crazy Irish people attacking mainland America for reasons known only to themselves. So, yeah, he's in it as like the mad guy. So let's try and explain this plot. So,
sure.
He's a mad old scientist who's been like rebuilding himself because he's got damage on him, and he's been rebuilding himself with like other people's body parts or something. And his name's Abbott Reeves, and he has this mandroid. He built the mandroid, but he stole the technology to build the mandroid off Denise Crosby's character, Nora Hunter, and he has been sending the mandroid to various different points in time, because yes, he has a time travel machine, to wipe out various armies, because he has some big overarching plan, which we won't spoil. So all that's going on. The mandroid, who is also good friends with Tad Harino, who plays Takada, who was like the sidekick to Abbott Reeves and was helping do all the scientific stuff and the building of the mandroid stuff. He and Takada, they break away from Abbott Reeves and try and escape. Mandroid does escape. Takada helps him with his life, very sadly. And that will form part of the mandroid's desire to get Reeves back and avenge Takada's death. And then there is Denise Crosby, who is the only other scientist in the world who can help the mandroid once he is damaged and needs help. So he goes there. And then do you want to take it on from there, sir? What happens next?
I certainly do. Now, we should mention that Denise Crosby's Nora Hunter, she's also, because she's a robotics expert and because this is a 1980s movie, she's also created a little mini robot that can fly around and be adorable.
Yeah, well, it's a mini robot that turns into like a fuzzing ball of light and then whizzes around. It doesn't which I have to say, although I hate those like mid-80s light effects, they just don't look very good. Even in something like Ghostbusters, where they're admittedly done as best as they've ever been done.
Sure.
It's at least preferable than having this rather clunky-looking mini robot dangling around on a bit of wire, which is the only other way they could have done it. At least it turning into light and whizzing around the place is sort of miraculous, you know.
Right. There are a couple of scenes where it is just kind of hanging by a wire.
Right.
When you see that, you're like, you know what, you're right.
Yes.
It's better the other way.
And clearly attached to his back at some points as well, which is also hilarious.
Yes, the mandroid's back.
The mandroid's back, yeah.
So Nora Hunter and the mandroid have to go track down Abbott Reeves, and in order to do that, they have to head into the jungle and get the help of, I guess, basically someone with a riverboat or a boat that can help them get to this location.
The river rat Harry Fontana.
Yes, played by the amazing Andrew Prine, and he is. I mean, he comes really close to walking away with this movie because of who he is, but also because his character is perfect because he's a sleazebag, but he has that sort of occasional heart of gold.
Yeah, I mean, he's Han Solo, almost right down to the. He's kind of Han Solo meets Crocodile Dundee meets, a sleazeball. That's kind of.
I'd watch that.
Yeah, of course. No, completely.
And I did.
Yeah.
So he reluctantly, though sometimes not reluctantly, does help them, and eventually finds out.
Let's not forget that he wins the
sort of the opportunity to escort.
The opportunity, thank you. He wins the opportunity to take her up the river in his boat. While I might add, the mandroid is hilariously disguised with a giant trilby and a bandage across his head and a huge cape. But he wins this by hiding out while a bar fight ensues, because Denise Crosby walks into this sleazy bar out of the 1940s that's kind of on this swamp. Walks in and sort of says, okay, the toughest person gets to take me down the river. He ducks behind the bar. Meanwhile, everyone, including the wonderful Peggy Mannix as Bayou Betty, has a massive fight in the bar. And when they've all killed them or hurt themselves or knocked themselves out, he strolls out the bar nonchalantly, having actually not fist fought anybody. And Denise believes him to be her man. But it's a hilarious scene that then causes Bayou Betty and her gang of rogues and fat, beardy fishermen to chase after them in speedboats to have just a pointless action scene that really doesn't go anywhere.
And that stuff goes on forever.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it just seems like it's like the whole central plot of the movie is Harry Fontana's attempt to continue to escort them while all these other boat people are coming out trying to stop him. And yeah, that's a good 20 minutes of the movie. And though there's some nice action in there, it really does feel somewhat superfluous because it's not part of the plot.
No, about the only bit that's sort of even relevant to the plot is that one of the fat, beardy fishermen is also one of Abbott Reeves's rent-a-goons, and
Exactly.
he happens to spot the mandroid farting around on the boat and kind of goes, oh no, it's the mandroid, and then he's able to go back to Abbott Reeves and tell him that they're on their way. But yeah, it's completely bizarre. It's also bizarre that really Harry Fontana is no good at anything. He doesn't come up with a way. Well, no, he does that one thing where he wastes an entire barrel of oil, throws it into the river, and just shoots it.
He says he saw that in a movie once.
Right. I'm sure it was more successful in whatever movie that was. But that was fantastic. And then, of course, the mandroid is revealed when he sends off a torpedo into one of the boats.
And that's one of the nice things about the mandroid is because his abilities are ill-defined by the movie, that he can pretty much, I mean, he is the Deus Ex mandroid.
Right, exactly. Yeah. He can basically do whatever is required of the plot. But yeah, there's this whole, completely, utterly pointless sequence, which I suppose is meant to be charming. But they're trying to find the plane that the original man, before he became the mandroid, crash-landed in.
Yes. That's exactly right.
And when they find the plane, Denise Crosby gets into the plane, only for it so that obviously she gets into the plane while wearing a white T-shirt, so we get some nice wet T-shirt action. But the plane starts to sink, and instead of just being able to get out the way she got in, apparently now she's trapped, which leads to a whole other cumbersome fucking series of events.
Yes, it is a way for Harry Fontana to reintroduce himself to the plot,
and do about the only useful thing he does in the whole movie.
Well, no, he does one other very, very useful thing right at the end of the movie, which felt exactly like the filmmaker saying, we need to end this right now.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. It goes as far as it can go. and then it's just like, oh, how do we end it? Oh, I know, we'll do this. And that'll be fine. In fact, the whole movie is a glorious stream of consciousness. It doesn't really have a
plot. It has a bunch of stuff. They're going up the river to get this bad guy. Throw in a bunch of cliched characters and a mandroid and a sexy kung fu scientist, and because she does some fighting, right? She can she can hold her own. And then you throw in a ninja for no reasons whatsoever, except that it's revealed that he's Takada's son at a certain point. And then just have them all go up the river and try, and that's about it. And then everything else, like all of a sudden we find out that people from the past are now in the present, even though that was never really established until cavemen suddenly wander out into the jungle just in order to kidnap them for 5 minutes, right?
Yes, and they do escape from those cavemen as well. This movie is sort of like, I don't know how familiar you are with Axe Cop, the webcomic, which is written by like a 7 or 8 year old and then kind of translated into a comic book by his older brother. Yes. But this is like that. This is like a kid telling a story, where it's like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and it doesn't connect to what came before. And once it's all out there, it's just like, and now it's over.
Yeah, but it's kind of delightful. I mean, I loved it. What's funny is when you're watching it, even if it's the first time you're watching and you're watching it in 2014, when you're watching it, you go, as long as you've seen enough kind of bonkers action B-movies or action sci-fis or whatever, I found it very easy to just go with the film. Absolutely. It's nothing you can possibly take too seriously, I wouldn't think. No. But it just goes from A to B to C to D to E. But it doesn't have it doesn't just go from A to B to C. It just keeps going until it doesn't go anymore. Now, we've mentioned the mandroid, mercenary, and scientist, but this is the point in our discussion that the ninja shows up. And in this case, that is Conan Lee from Ninja in the Dragon's Den. And I mean, he was an incredibly talented martial artist, and he was on Tiger and the Bee with Chow Yun-fat. This is a guy who could have been sort of the Asian crossover superstar in the 80s because he had both the martial arts ability and he spoke really good. He spoke English very well. Right. He could have been like a Sho Kosugi type character. Yes, he absolutely could have. And it's a shame that his career didn't go further than it ended up going, at least in the U.S., though he still appears in things every once in a while. He did one of the major voices in the video game Sleeping Dogs, for those who are familiar with that. But he shows up literally with about a half hour left in the movie, and he is the son of, as we mentioned before, Takada, the Abbott Reeves right-hand man who was a friend of the mandroid. Yeah. And he's there to get revenge, right? He's there to get revenge on Abbott Reeves, and he joins someone has clearly sent him a telegram or something. Right. I mean, his motivation is clear. He's avenging his father, but how he knows about all of this and how he is going on the exact same mission as these guys, but they never encounter each other up to that point is pretty incredible. Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of movie where if all of a sudden they were fighting dinosaurs, it wouldn't be out of place. That doesn't quite happen, but it's one of those films that, I don't know, if aliens landed and started, I don't know, trying to mine them all for their bladders or something, it wouldn't be so far-fetched, considering this movie has time travel and a ludicrous Bond-like villain who's putting himself back together using like body parts and stuff, a mandroid, a ninja, a kick-ass scientist, a Han Solo style river rat. It's kind of got everything in it. It's got Bayou Betty, the big butch lesbian fisherwoman. It's got everything. Who's clearly got a much better boat and knows the river much better than she would have been way better because his boat keeps crashing down. Now, we haven't really talked about what Abbott Reeves' plan is. His master plan is, and this is kind of bizarre considering that he's just barely keeping himself alive, but he wants to use the mandroid technology to improve himself enough to then go back in time to basically become Caesar. He wants to rule Rome. Yeah. And he's had the mandroid kind of clear the way by destroying a lot of Caesar's armies so that he can just march in and declare that he is all of a sudden the leader of the Roman Empire. I'm not quite sure how that would have worked out for him, but I just love the idea that
this time travel technology is introduced right at the beginning, and then it's brought back at the end. But they don't really explore it at all. You think he would have the ability to do just about, in terms of say he's dying.
Right, exactly, yeah.
You think he could use the technology to help with that? But no, the only thing he wants to do is to travel back in time and replace Caesar.
and why the Roman Empire, considering, it fell?
Well, it wouldn't fall with him in charge.
I mean, but couldn't he have just, I don't know, gone back in time and, I don't know, become the American president or something like that, like something that might actually have some weight and volition in modern times, as opposed to, like, even if he went back and became Hitler, he would still get shot, you know what I mean?
Sure. It's a very good question. They explore things on a very surface level in this movie, but if you start to ask questions, you might become a little bit frustrated because the answers are not coming.
Right. I mean, any major empire that it's not just a case of dancing in and going, well, I killed a few of your soldiers, so I'm your leader. I mean, there was like thousands upon millions of people in the Roman Empire who would have, killed him before he could have got anywhere.
Well, you also have to ask, like, if Denise Crosby is such an incredible wizard of technology that she could bring a person back to life with what she has created up to this point, and have a apparently self-powering robot that has sentience.
Yeah.
That she could have come up with some sort of weapon to destroy Abbott Reeves from space or something like that.
Also, why is he going to go back in time and, like, he's dressed a bit like a king?
Yes. Well, he's going to take over the world, so he's got to look the part.
Right, exactly. It was just... I mean, I don't necessarily need to say much more about it, except that I loved it. I unconditionally loved it. I took it to my bosom, and I unconditionally loved it. There was nothing... I put a post out because we've got this new group on Facebook, which is actually going really, really well. Mm-hmm. And I put a post on there saying, for suggestions about these kind of movies. Because after I did this double bill, which was, one was your pick and one was one that I'd always been meaning to see anyway, I just wanted to watch more from this era, just more of films like this. It doesn't matter. I don't care like who made them and, where or when. I just want to watch more of this. Anything that has action, sci-fi, horror, anything like that in it, I want to watch now at this point, as long as it's from sort of 1982 to 1992.
It's interesting to note that the writers of Eliminators, Paul DeMeo and Danny Bilson, who also created the Trancers series,
of course,
before this, they went on to they wrote Arena as well, and then they went on to create the screenplay for The Rocketeer, which also has sort of that childlike glee and fanciful nature, though obviously put through a much different lens and a much larger budgeted one.
Yeah, they did the TV series Flash. They did Trancers. They did The Rocketeer. They've done writing on the James Bond video games.
Yeah, apparently they went into video games afterwards, and they went on to work on Red Faction and Company of Heroes. So I guess that's what they're doing now. I think they sort of peaked out with The Rocketeer.
Yeah, but I mean, Trancers, what a great series that is, and to be connected to The Rocketeer, Trancers, and this, wow, you're a winner at life. That's my feeling. My feeling is you've succeeded, and no one should demand anything of you ever again.
I think it's time to retire, boys.
Yeah, I think just give them both a big plaque and a house in the country. I mean, seriously, if you had written Trancers, undoubtedly one of the best series that Charles Band's ever been involved in terms of just consistent quality, right. Without having to resort to miniaturized doll special effects of any kind. Which seems to be the rest of his oeuvre. Eliminators, which is just genius because it combines everything that everybody loves all at once and still manages to hold itself together. And The Rocketeer, which is beloved by millions. So, yeah, just retire now, guys. You're done.
Yeah, and again, I've mentioned Arena a few times now, but that's something that maybe those who haven't seen it, it's a lot of fun. Basically, it's Rocky with aliens, and that if that sounds like something you'd want to see, it would probably live up to that. It also had a really great poster. Something about this era. And it's almost a shame because I know that many people are really a lot more familiar with those full moon films of the 90s. But these Empire films, the marketing behind them was great. Some of them are just a lot of fun.
Right, indeed. I agree completely and utterly, and I would urge everyone to check this out. Is it on that box set that came out with the Arena on it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it was like four movies on one? For a very, very long time, Eliminators was not available on any home format except for VHS. And then I think they put it on a set with either one movie or three other movies. My understanding, and this is, I apologize if I'm wrong on this information. My understanding is that it's a full screen 4:3 version of the film, while the movie itself was not shot that way. I think the only way to see it in its original aspect ratio is it was shown on one of those high definition television networks a year back or 2 years back, and some people you can get recordings of that.
It is. I actually own this then. I don't know because some of my stuff's still in boxes, but I actually own this Eliminators because I own this sci-fi movie marathon, which comes with America 3000, Arena, The Time Guardian, and Eliminators. So, excellent. So I have this for all time. That's all I needed to know, isn't it?
That sounds pretty a badass foursome, by the way.
It's a pretty sweet foursome, and it only cost me like $5. It's now up to $6.86 in American money, so it has increased in price probably. But you can get it used for $3.87, so don't you worry.
That's less than $1 per movie, and I think this movie is worth. I'm just going to say it. More than $1.
It's worth definitely. If this movie was by itself, even as a vanilla disc, for $5, I would buy it.
Yes, I think that's a strong recommend.
Yes, indeed, and we should note just before we move on to The Vindicator that at the end of Eliminators, the gentleman in question, the guy Abbott Reeves, has made himself sort of better than the mandroid. He's kind of like made himself bionic or made himself cyborg. And this is important because almost an identical thing happens at the end of The Vindicator.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
With our criminal.
I mean, I think that sort of thing is repeated in a lot of these kind of technology gone berserk style movies of the mid-'80s, but it is kind of eerie how similar that showdown goes down. Though the tones of these two movies are very different, as we'll get into. Oh, also one more thing is that Harry Fontana, played by Andrew Prine in the movie, was originally supposed to be played by Tim Thomerson from Trancers, which, I mean, he would have been actually really great in that role too. But Andrew Prine, who I think is just a really underrated actor, he really does kind of save the day on some of those longer sequences.
So now we're going to move on to The Vindicator. Which, as we've said before, Jean-Claude Lord, made for 14th of February 1986, came out, written by Edith Ray and David Preston, who had worked on nothing you've ever heard of.
No, not really. I mean, Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, some people might be familiar with that movie. That's another one of those 80s movies which I saw way too much. I mean, I watched a lot of really awful stuff back then.
It has Molly Ringwald in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's one of those kind of sci-fi. I can't remember if it was in 3D or not. I think it actually might have been. But that's one that of all the other work that they've done, they're kind of writers for hire, I guess. There's a lot of like kid stuff in there.
Right, exactly. And it stars David McElraith. I'm going to say
McElraith. Maybe?
McElraith.
I'm going to say McElraith.
Oh, it's an I. Okay, when you go to the proper page for him on IMDb, that's an I. Okay, so yeah, McElraith. That makes more sense. What's he been in? A bunch of stuff, but nothing particular that stands out. Terry Austin is in there. She was in Raising Cain and Knots Landing. And you've got Richard Cox, who is known for Cruising with Al Pacino. In fact, has worked with Al Pacino quite a few times, Looking for Richard. And he's been on lots of TV series and things. This guy appears to be American as well. There's a lot of American people in it, considering it's made in Canada. And then the people you will know, however, is Pam Grier is in this movie as Hunter. And Hunter. And Maury Shaken is in it as Bert Arthurs. Which I do love.
Maury Shaken, one of Canada's great actors who has sadly passed away. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Most of the lead actors in this film are American, but almost all of the supporting actors are Canadian for obvious reasons.
Yeah, which is a shame because there's plenty of decent Canadian actors.
Are we supposed to think that the action, the action in this film, the story, that it takes place in the U.S.? I can't remember if they ever actually mention where it takes place.
There's so much in this movie that isn't explained. For example, like, who is the blonde girl that's living with his wife?
Yeah. Why is there someone living? Like, does she move in after he dies? Yeah, that's when we talk about the plot. Well, that won't make any sense.
No, it won't. But you go ahead, sir. Talk about the plot.
Oh, the plot.
Because I have no idea what happened.
It's interesting. We've already mentioned the Terminator. We've mentioned RoboCop. RoboCop is often brought up when people talk about the Vindicator because of a kind of general plot, which is that David McElwraith, if that's how you pronounce his name, he's sort of a scientist working on all sorts of odd projects, but his budgets kept getting slashed by his boss, Alex White, played by Richard Cox. And because he's kind of nosing around in the technology that they don't want him finding out about, they're working on sort of this spacesuit technology that can also be used to control monkeys. And so they blow him up. They blow the fuck out of him.
Yeah, it's completely bizarre, that opening scene where McElwraith comes in and demands that is it Catherine Disher playing Catherine Collins? She's working on the monkeys, and he demands that she basically kill a monkey just for no good reason. He just basically wants to see how hard he can push this technology, which, as far as I can figure out, just makes people angry. It was kind of like Hulk-esque, I suppose. Gives them some extra strength and makes them a bit angry and turns their heart rate up. And he just turned it all the way up. And instead of saying, they were all shouting at him, it's going to kill the monkey, it's going to kill the monkey, he was like, I don't care, and it killed the monkey. And then he went, it's not good enough. Do it again.
That's right, keep working on it.
Walked away. He was a real dickbag.
It's supposed to establish that he's sort of evil right from the beginning, which is a shame because a little later on they try to add a little bit of color and dimension to his character, but every once in a while they'll just pull it back and be like, oh no, he's just an asshole and that's why he's doing all this, because it's really hard to understand what his motivations are in this movie.
Yeah, well, he doesn't have any. I mean, he's got like some floozy that he's carrying on with at work, who there's sort of some hilariously awkward scenes with. He has some sidekick who keeps speaking to him in a German accent because he thinks whatever they're doing is like Frankenstein.
That's right.
Which is completely odd. He seemingly has a whole fleet of scientists who are willing to do his bidding and even kill for him. He's managed to sort of co-opt all these like very middle-of-the-road, middle-aged like house guys and scientists to just kind of bump each other off and be mad people.
He's sort of like a Bill Gates-esque technology wizard, but there's really no reason that people should be so willing to follow him into the depths of depravity. By the way, we haven't really mentioned the fact that when Carl is murdered, he's brought back as a half man, half robot.
Which was almost their intention all along.
Yeah, that's what they really want. That's what they wanted to do.
Yeah. That again doesn't make any sense because surely killing him in a way that didn't like destroy 90% of his body would have been easier. Like injecting him with something, you know what I mean? So they would have had a full body to work with.
I mean, I do think in this particular case, getting rid of him was the first priority, but they realize after he's dead that they have a potential to, hey, this is a great test subject because he's just dead. Let's do something with him. And it's at first when he appears, when they're like, they have some sort of piece of his armor or his technology that is meant to control him, but that is taken out of his body because they think that the test that's supposed to bring him back to life isn't working. But that's when he comes back. So he sort of has...
it's a remote control, isn't it?
Yes, that's exactly right. So he's able to control himself because that part is not in him. And because that monkey magic is involved, whenever someone touches him or gets him upset, he gets super angry and kills that thing. But as soon as he kills it, then he's back to normal again. Yeah,
until he conveniently works out how to control that as well, just at the right particular moment when his wife is in jeopardy. But no, it's an odd blend, this movie, because there's sort of, inappropriate humor at certain points.
Sure.
The effects are kind of the effects are good. Like I liked when he was in the steam or whatever, the explosion thing was happening, and he was in the room and you saw all his skin coming off. That was kind of well done. But him looking as a robot was really terrible.
Which was surprising.
Rubbery.
Yeah, because Stan Winston Studios helped do some of the effects on this movie, who, of course, would go on to work on Terminator 2. And, Stan Winston is a legend. So you would think that robots would sort of be their thing. But, the robot form, sometimes it looks okay, but generally not so much.
I mean, put it this way, Crichton on Red Dwarf looks better than this guy. Because there was one bit where, like, he's damaged or whatever, and you see his like hand hit what's meant to be his robot metal bit, and it was just clearly like a rubber plastic plate that you could buy at a Halloween store to dress up as a robot for Christmas kind of thing.
I do like there's a part in the movie, I won't...
Why would you dress up as a robot for Christmas? I just realised what I said, but let's move on.
Oh, I thought that was one of your own personal traditions.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Let's just go with that and say that it is.
There's a part in the movie where the robot man is stopping a car from getting away, and he's smushing it together just by pushing forward, and that part is done really, really well. There's someone in the car at the time, and he kills him as he's doing it, and it's both gruesome, and I like the effect, and it has a kind of kinetic energy to it, which is good because a lot of this movie, and I didn't hate this movie, there's parts of it that I really like, but there's a lot of this movie that is sort of plotting because you don't really care about Carl's...
you don't know anybody. You don't really know anything at all.
That's right. You spend a lot more time with the bad guys because it's almost like a slasher movie because it keeps going back to him getting revenge on people, but you don't really learn anything more about him, and the only thing that gets established before all the action goes down is that he has a girlfriend and he's a scientist, and that's really it.
And there's a horrible, prolonged sequence. His wife is stated to be pregnant.
Right.
But then there is a horrible, prolonged sequence where his wife undergoes all sorts of violence.
Yes.
The kind of starts 2/3 of the way through and kind of continues almost to the very end of the movie where she's being like knocked about and pushed about and strangled and almost raped and all sorts of other stuff. But then it has this kind of happy-go-lucky family ending that's all a bit weird as well. Like, it just... None of it sat together well. Like, Pam Grier's character shows up and is all very, like, hard-bitten and whatever.
Sure.
And no nonsense. But doesn't... Like, once she figures out what's going on, she's kind of had enough of it as well. And, in fact, her ending is really weird. Like, I don't...
It's tough because we can't talk about too much about how these characters turn out.
Right.
But Pam Grier's character is the best character in this movie. She's so much
the best character. Oh, when she's fighting in the dojo and then she takes her mask off. Wow.
Yeah.
Voom.
Yeah, she is. It's amazing to think that this is probably a decade after her kind of mainstream, most popular time period, but she is both the most charismatic person in this movie and by far the most attractive.
Yes.
and she really brings it too because she's playing a role where she is supposed to be on top of everything, that she's like always sees all the angles and gets, like you said, she gets really frustrated when she finds out that someone has been keeping information from her. So the way her character ends up is a little bit... It not only is frustrating and sort of strange for what we've established with the character, but it also works against sort of the heroic characters. It doesn't give them the satisfaction that you think that they deserve at that point.
Yeah. No, the other stuff she was doing in the decade is a movie called The All-Nighter, which looks like
I know that movie.
Terrible kind of 80s girly kind of sex comedy flick with Joan Cusack in it. So everyone, please rush out to watch that. Not that I don't like Joan Cusack, but I don't really want to see her in like an 80s sex comedy. She's, of course, in Above the Law with my favourite and yours, Steven Seagal. And she's in The Package. And she's also in Class of 1999. That's right. The decade, but she's in The Package with Gene Hackman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, she had it was an interesting, somewhat unfortunate decade. By the way, The All-Nighter also stars Susanna Hoffs from the Bangles, which for those of us who grew up in the 80s, that felt like a big deal when she was in that movie.
Yes, except now it's not a big deal at all because who the fuck are the Bangles?
Susanna Hoffs is still out there. She's still making music. And
you're the only one waving the flag for her.
Actually, she records with Matthew Sweet now, for those who know Matthew Sweet, and they record like covers albums together.
Again, that's all you, sir, because anyone knows.
I swear there are people who care. But
nobody at this table.
Strangely, despite the fact that I'm talking about it, I'm not one of them.
Yeah. You could have fooled me. I believe that you're in the closet about that. I think you're probably a closet Bangles fan and a closet Matthew Sweet fan. So,
actually, I do like Matthew Sweet. But anyway, back to Pam Grier.
She's phenomenal in this movie, as is Maury Shaken. The two of them kind of make this movie bearable.
Yes, and they both get a few interesting things to do and scenes where they get to command, and when they do that, the movie kind of springs to life, which kind of focuses a little too much attention on the fact that Carl, the main character, he's a real non-entity.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Oh, so hang on. David McElrath is the mandroid, then.
They list him as Frankenstein. You're right. Sorry, he might be the names I didn't even pick up on who was who, but you're right. I guess Alex is the main character. He's the robot guy?
No, Alex is no. Alex is Alex the? No, Alex is the bad guy. Alex is definitely the bad guy. Richard White is definitely the bad guy. Alex White, played by Richard Cox, is definitely the bad guy. And David McElrath, this is so professional. I'm so glad we waited till 10 o'clock at night to record this.
No, okay, I think we've been right all along up to this point, so that's fine. So Carl Lehman is the guy who gets blown up and turned into a mandroid in this movie.
Right, yes, indeed. Yes, and Richard Cox is the one who will eventually not only turn himself into a mandroid, but also a couple of his friends.
Yes.
I mean, it gets really kind of, his wife, Terry Austin, is sort of really put through the ringer, and it does become kind of violent and crazy. But, again, in the climax sequence anyway, the mandroids in both movies do very little indeed.
Yes. I mean, at least in the final confrontation in this movie, they refer to him in IMDb as Frankenstein. This is Carl Lehman character after he gets turned into a robot. Frankenstein kind of matches fisticuffs with Alex White. There's an actual confrontation there. But even in this case, it's somewhat anticlimactic because it isn't as physical as you might think.
No, they don't. They don't put on blue headbands or lycra pants and dance to bad 80s synth pop. That never happens. Sadly.
I wish that did happen. Actually, that really would have picked things up.
Like a remake of Megaforce.
That's right.
Yes, because he wears a blue headband and ridiculously tight pants in that movie. The wonderful Barry Bostwick, but also a lot like the movie with Jamie Lee Curtis in it, and John Travolta, which I forget what it's called.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, but the name escapes me.
Is it called just like Physical or...
No, wasn't it...
Sweaty Clefts or something?
Can you figure out, by the way, the movie that The Vindicator reminded me of the most?
No.
It's not exact, and maybe, but I think it's certainly closer to the plot of this movie than RoboCop was, considering that RoboCop gets brought up in almost every review of The Vindicator. But the movie this most reminded me of was Darkman, which has a very similar plot where a boss orchestrates the explosion of someone who then comes back with increased strength and kind of has to hide himself away, and he has a partner or a wife or a girlfriend that he kind of contacts, but he won't let her get close to him. And then it even has a confrontation at the end between the boss and this guy. There's lots of elements that I think that are very similar. Of course, Darkman is a much, much better movie than The Vindicator.
Right. Although the Darkman does lack Pam Grier, so
that's it. It's a shame that Pam Grier, that this performance and this character couldn't have been in a movie that took advantage of it more.
What about Darkman with Bruce Campbell in the lead and Pam Grier as his wife?
I want to live in the world where that exists.
Yeah, so do I.
That sounds terrific to me.
That sounds terrific.
Some people describe Pam Grier's part in this movie as sort of a semi-cameo, and she's not in a lot of it. She gets brought in at one point and then kind of takes the lead as the kind of the main force of baddie action. But, she makes a huge impact. This movie would have been better if she was the bad guy, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, it would have been better if it was just about her. If it was just Hunter's story and there was no mandroid and there was no scientists and it was just about her being a kick-ass assassin.
There's a great moment where one of the bad guy scientists, and it's weird that at first they're just kind of introduced as being scientists, and then as the movie goes on, they're shown to be bigger and bigger assholes. Like they were just pricks all along, but nobody knew it.
Right.
But there's a woman who ends up witnessing the mandroid. We'll just keep calling him mandroid.
Yeah.
One of the things that happens, and Hunter has to come and visit this woman and murder her basically because she's seen too much, and she uses like a big kind of spike and drives it through her neck to kill her. And that's such a great scene because it's Pam Grier playing sympathetic while she's murdering this person and then immediately going into hard-ass mode afterwards. And it kind of shows what this movie could have been and what could have been done with that character.
Yeah, and but the laser guns are absolutely ridiculous too. And that's just ridiculous that he has laser gun technology. I mean, all of it's ridiculous. I mean, the best sequence probably is when he explodes out of the furnace at the beginning, once he's made into a robot.
The only other sequence that I really love in this movie, and I have to say I think it's really well done, is I'm not going to go into too much detail because it would be a pretty big spoiler, but throughout most of the movie, they're trying to capture the mandroid. They're trying to capture him because he's very difficult. He's very slippery because he has so much firepower and strength. And they end up doing it in a really kind of interesting way. And they kind of trap him in a very interesting way. And the way that that's set up and the way that they do that, I think, is done really, really well because it can kind of it wasn't a huge surprise what happens, but the actual method of it, I think, works kind of perfectly in the movie. And I wish there were a few more moments like that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give it that. I mean, it's not a terrible film any more than The Eliminators is. It's sort of, but it is lesser than The Eliminators. It's not as much fun, sadly.
That's right. I wish it embraced that fun side a little more. Like you said, it gets dark in places that are a little uncomfortable, and
the tone is just all over the place.
Yeah, exactly, and especially when it comes to Lauren Lehman, the wife, because she gets it she's basically a victim in the entire movie, and when they really turn it on, it seems excessive.
It does, yeah, it does seem really excessive. But yes, I agree with the trapping of the robot. That's a good sequence. And I don't mind the climax until the actual climax, and then it's all like it's just these two robots on a gurney, like spewing their liquid out or whatever it is that runs them, the magic ape juice.
Magic ape juice.
And then, whatever it is. And then a rather pathetic kind of fight between Cox and McElraith.
It's funny that they spend so much time in the movie talking about how these creatures, these robots, these mandroids are going to be basically invincible. That they're because the suits are made to exist in space, that almost nothing can penetrate them. When Pam Grier goes looking for him, they have these guns that shoot acid that can only be used on a certain part of his suit, and that's the only way that they think they can get to him. But in the final scene, you've got Lauren, who basically has to battle three of these guys by herself, and she does a pretty good job. She manages to stop a bunch of them just by kind of pulling out wires and hitting some exposed parts on their midsection.
Right, but because where they are, what they call at some point like the umbilical socket or something, which is basically where they are pumped full of the wizard ape juice in their birthing period, one imagines. It's this big cumbersome stopper thing that's on their hip. Like it could easily be knocked off or broken or shot or... Yeah, it's ridiculous. And as for his spacesuit, it burns up in the fire almost instantly. So...
Now, I wish, let's give a quick spoiler warning, even though this doesn't really give anything away. But I do want to talk to you about the very final scene of the movie.
There is a spoiler coming up. But we don't really spoil the film, you could still watch it anyway. There's a spoiler, it's coming up, a spoiler we're going to say. But we don't really spoil the film, you can watch the film anyway. Oh, there is a spoiler. Doug wants to talk about the end of the film. There's a spoiler coming up after this song, you can take it as read. But it won't really spoil the film, so ignore everything I just said.
Oh, in the when
museum.
When he's dead and she's got her kid, who seemingly survived the fetus survived all the knocking about she had done.
That's a very strange scene. The whole purpose of it is to show that there's some sort of long-lasting positive effects, but they set it up as if he's a hero because he's helped make this. He's helped bring forth this technology that allows people in space to wear the suit.
Yeah,
and that's what he's connected to. And like the kid who's now is like, my dad was a hero, and it's like, yeah, he sure was. And then the movie just ends.
Yeah, right. It's completely bizarre. It's only so that we've endured all that with the family. It's just a nice, little wrap up. But yeah, it makes absolutely no sense.
It's so strange. Like anyone gave a shit about the fact that this was supposed to be a spacesuit technology.
Right, exactly.
You made robots, man.
Not only that, but you made robots using magic ape juice that could crush a car and were impervious to anything except acid guns.
There's a part, and I know we're finishing up here, but there's a part about 3/4 of the way through the movie where they sort of ask Alex White, the bad guy, kind of the main overseer of all the badness, what his motivations
are. Overseer, yeah.
What his motivations are, and he kind of explains himself fairly eloquently. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was very much the case, that he wants to use this technology for good, theoretically. But we find out later that that's a big lie. But wouldn't it have been more interesting if he just, he knows that this technology can all do really great stuff, but he's so dedicated to making sure that it's going to come into fruition that he's willing to do anything, even get into bed with people like Hunter, who's and a bunch of evil scientists, and even kill one of his own employees.
Also, why would a head of a scientific corporation know a kick-ass kung fu assassin? Why would he just have her on speed dial?
It seemed like he's used her many times in the past because she keeps referring to the past, like this time it's going to cost you more, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so hostile takeovers, I guess.
I guess if you want to make it to the top, those are the kind of people you have to know.
Hey, if I have to know Pam Grier in her 80s prime, rather, I'll do that. Is what I'm trying to say.
All right, that's well. I will gladly get into bed with that.
Yeah, I'll know Pam Grier in her 2014 prime. It doesn't bother me. And look, you wouldn't say no at any point. Pam Grier is Pam Grier is Pam Grier. The lady is a legend. So she can do no wrong, and she's stunningly beautiful. So.
No, continue to tell us how lovely she is.
Oh, but she is. She's absolutely delightful. She's absolutely delightful, striking, wonderful, sensual, sexy, excellent actress. Integrity by the bucket load. Great for African American rights, great for feminist rights. She's just all round perfection.
I feel like this world would be better if we were all Pam Grier.
Are you kidding me? Of course. I mean, except the fact that then we'd all be Pam Grier, and therefore Pam Grier would have lost her luster. Because if everyone was Pam Grier, she wouldn't be Pam Grier. So I think you could say the world would be better if we all took a leaf out of Pam Grier's book and tried to be more like Pam Grier.
Okay, we're half Pam Grier, half Maury Chaykin.
That's a hideous. Although that does kind of describe you, Doug. So yeah, I'll go with it. No, I'm kidding.
I am a charismatic Canadian.
Yes, and angelic in your own way is what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sure, and you care for small animals, don't you?
I am married. That's true. She'll never listen to this.
No. Nobody listens to this anymore, Doug. Don't worry about it.
So that's The Vindicator from 1986, a follow-up to I almost said The Eliminators, taking a page out of your book.
You can always take a page out of my book, Doug, and I'll always gladly let you. But I would suggest watching both movies back to back and enjoying them thoroughly. That's what I would suggest. Although The Vindicator is not as good and we haven't exactly given it a sterling review, I would still suggest watching it.
Oddly, The Vindicator has a 5.1 out of 10 on the IMDb, while Eliminators has a 4.1 out of 10, though obviously Eliminators has a lot more people who have actually seen it and rated it. I would recommend, despite how we have presented things, to watch them in reverse order and watch The Vindicator and then Eliminators so you can end on a high note.
I would agree with that, and I would also say that IMDb, in terms of its ratings, is almost always wrong.
Yes, so fuck IMDb and their stupid ratings.
No, I mean, fuck the ratings. It's like Rotten Tomatoes is always wrong as well in terms of ratings. They're always wrong. They'll give something like 98% and something else like 20%, and the 20% movie was clearly more enjoyable and, better executed and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's absolute horseshit. And
you know what? Ratings of movies of any kind are entire horseshit, and people's opinions about them really should just be ignored.
Thus rendering this entire show to the point. No, I would disagree in terms of, I think, opinions when they are put in some form of context and or merely discussed for fun, like we have tonight. Like, there's two types of show that I do. Like, we either discuss films for fun and just go, look, these are just silly, enjoyable things. Go watch them and enjoy them. They're completely harmless. Or I try and, if they are a more sort of, if they require a deeper look, I at least try and kind of quantify my opinion with something or against something or by something, rather than just these, retards like Peter Travers from Rolling Stone, who just gets my bile and ire every time the word critic comes up, because he's such a simpering arse face who needs to be have both his legs broken. But
I don't disagree, and anything you said, actually, I don't disagree with it. And the thing about a film like Eliminators is that, in a lot of ways, it's critic-proof anyway. Because
you say that, but you know that some critic would watch and go, "Well, I didn't find it."
Oh, I just mean that if you were the kind of person who would seek out a movie like this, that no one saying no, especially no name critic like a Peter Travers, saying that this is just a bunch of goofy, stupid, childish horseshit, that would, that is not going to keep you away from it.
No, true. If you're into these kind of movies, you're into these kind of movies, and nothing that I say, Doug says, or Peter Travers says, for that matter, is going to make a blind bit of difference. But thank you for listening anyway. It's been
but it doesn't matter what Peter Travers says. As soon as you see that poster for Eliminators, you'd be like, maybe he's wrong. And
yes.
He is. Well,
he's always wrong.
That's right.
He's always
wrong. Just the opposite of whatever he...
Yeah.
I feel like any critic who thinks that he's better than the movies that he's reviewing doesn't deserve to be a critic. Certainly, it shouldn't be giving opinions about things, especially in genres that people are very passionate about, like yourself and myself, and do take them seriously, even though we recognize that sometimes you're allowed to have fun with them.
And Doug, you have just put that in so much a better way than I have, and thank you for that. That's fantastic.
Well, you gave me the words. I just summed them up.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly how I feel. Like, anyone who thinks that they're above the film, but then, without quantifying. Like, if you don't like something, but then you can point to reasons why your opinion makes sense to you, but also you can state at the end of your opinion that your opinion doesn't have to be everyone's opinion, it's just your opinion. That's absolutely fine. But it's these people who just attack stuff without any backing that... I was always taught in English class and in maths class to show your working.
That's
to
it.
Explain your... where you got your work from. In English class, explain where you got your quotes from, and in maths class, explain your working out. I was always told to do that, and that's how I approach things, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, Doug, it's been another pleasure, sir. I've enjoyed this immensely.
Yeah. No, this was so much fun because not only was I introduced to a movie that I didn't have much familiarity with, but it gave me a real opportunity, an opportunity outside of sitting in my apartment by myself, revisit a real favorite from my childhood. I must have seen Eliminators a dozen times between the years of 1987 and 1992, and it had a big effect on me. But like watching it this time, there was so much of it that I had no memory of at all. It was one of those things where the general concept and the marketing, especially that poster, had that almost that drilled into my brain while the rest of the movie kind of just jettisoned away. But it was a real fun time revisiting.
It's one of those great 80s movies that actually delivers on its poster. There's so many of those posters that movies don't deliver on, and this really does. So that was good. It
feels like it actually was devoted to living up to what they promised. And you know, so even though there's a lot of the movie which, you know, not it doesn't directly connect in with the plot, they give you the mandroid, mercenary, scientist, and ninja. They give them all something to do and let them kind of show off their skills. And I mean, you can't complain about that.
No, not at all. I think that the climax kind of falls away a little, but
we danced around it. But the way that the whole movie ends is so fucking ridiculous that you almost can't help but laugh. And then it just, as soon as like you realize like the action's over, it just ends. It goes right to the credits, right?
Yeah. And I almost don't know how else to end this movie. I mean, without them all sort of riding into the sunset or slapping each other's backs and laughing and it going to a freeze frame. Like, how else do you end this movie? It was kind of perfect the way they did it. Like, it takes enormous cojones to end a film the way they end it. It takes just enormous testicles, and God bless Charles Band for having those testicles.
I love the movie, and this is the same with almost all of the late 70s, early 80s kung fu movies, which is that all of the major loose ends, you tie them up, and then you just back away and you go, done, and then you just put the end on the screen.
Yeah, it was perfect. It's exactly how it should have been. And because I was like, wait a minute, there's not much of this movie left. And they were like, oh no, we failed. The time has run out. And I was like, oh, well, what are they going to do now then? And then they did what they did. And it was fantastic.
I like how we all are kind of primed to do that mental arithmetic when you're watching a movie, especially if you're watching it on a computer or something like that, and you see the clock and you realize that there at least has to be some credits left, right? And you're in the final 10 minutes, and it's like they got a lot of shit they got to wrap up really quick. There's not going to be any scene going to the museum in this one talking about how great Dad was.
In fact, that would be even more insane if suddenly he had like a robot child. Maybe if the little like flying robot thing was being taken through a museum by Denise Crosby and the little robot went blip, 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 and Denise went, yes, he was a hero, and then they wandered on. That would be almost the perfect way to end this movie.
We didn't mention that the robot has one of the. It is one of those like every 80s movie had where the robot talks in a language that only one person can understand.
Yes, and there's no explanation as to how she understands it. At all.
Why didn't she just design it so it speaks English? Who knows? Doesn't matter.
No, doesn't matter at all. And it is a joyous addition to. It's less annoying than any robotic and or CGI character that George Lucas has come up with. So
fair enough.
In my humble opinion. But less of that and more of this. Goodbye then, sir, and thank you ever so much for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure.
I love being on the After Movie Diner, as you know, and I hope to return soon.
You are welcome back anytime, sir. And maybe next time, who knows, we'll do like a double bill of Levon Helm cameos or something.
But finally, a chance to watch Sniper again.
Yeah, exactly. He's in a few movies, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And actually, he is the best part of Sniper by a massive margin.
Yeah, but we'll never do that documentary about him, which I just was, disappointed in.
Not very high on, unfortunately.
No. Anyway, sir, I have to shuffle off. So thank you ever so much, and we'll do this again. And Great. All the best, sir, and congratulations.
Hi, John Cross.
Hi, Jill.
He says hi, Jill. Goodbye, John Cross.
Yes, bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
You've got winter in your veins. Just like traffic, you're changing lanes. You're running away, meeting it head on. Both the different outcomes, both of them are wrong. You're riding up the storm, you're ready in the winds. Life throws up too many things. When will it stop? When will it start? Mr. Horst. Start again, yeah. Your future's looking shaky, but people on your side. You have to forgo any sense of pride. Everyone has opinions, you'll get lots of advice. Mostly it's just people that are trying to be nice. You found yourself a haven down by the tracks. You found woodland in the city, far away from the hacks. You found room for just a fiver. You found movies in a bin. I'm sure there were worse ways for a story to begin. And all that you need now is just one moment of the dark. You want to be moving forward, but the accelerator's stuck. And every day you have to restart your belief and work just a little bit harder, waiting on some future relief. You got screaming in your ears, shouting in your head. You wish these bloody voices would take you down a peg. Or you struggle with motivation. This bed is nice and warm. You're losing all your stuffing and you're really on form. The nights round here won't stop it. You're slowly getting thin. I'm sure there are worse ways for a story to begin. Well, I'm sure there are worse ways for a story to begin. To begin. Yeah, your story's just beginning to begin. There are worse ways for a story to begin.
There are men, and then there are second unit podcast men. The podcast you've just been listening to is part of the Second Unit Podcast Network. Find all of our shows at 2upn.blogspot.com or on Facebook under the Second Unit Podcast Network. Our fantastic list of shows include Drunk on VHS, We Came from the Basement, No Budget Nightmares, The After Movie Diner, Dr. Action and the Kick-Ass Kid, and Bloodbaths and Boomsticks. Take one podcast into the shower. Don't be a blithering idiot, Alan. We can give you the multiple podcast cleansing system all in one place that your hair deserves. Our programming is available across all platforms from iTunes to Podomatic, TalkShoe to Stitcher, so you have absolutely no excuse. Listen today, and a free naked person of your choice will be shipped from Thailand to your door in a matter of weeks. The Second Unit Podcast Network, bringing you the action and leaving the boring stuff to the other guys. Bloody hell. Who does a girl have to blow around here to get a decent beverage?